happening. I think we've had something like 1,400 cases, and I think we had something like 20 deaths, but all the deaths have been in residential homes, elderly residential homes.
Yeah.
Where it was introduced. And, you know, you get people who come in as we're not getting tourists really, but you get people who are coming to see family or whatever, and they're told, well, you have to quarantine for 14 days. Yes, yes, yes. And then they think that that doesn't really apply to me. And they go off and they meet their granny in the residential home or their mother. And that's how it's happened. So we've got to the stage where we've actually deported several people back out. And
have you technically deported them? There were no flights, no.
That's right. That's right. We do have flights, and we do have ships and things coming in and out, but it was severely restricted. All the conferences cancelled, meetings, everything. But Masonry is all back on strike. We're all back together now. We're having meetings, and I'm going to a couple next week up in Auckland, and we're supposed to, you know, wash your hands, use the disinfectant, try to socially distance a little, and so on. Usual common sense, really.
Have you got those regulations like in UK, 6 people gathering?
We did. In fact, with the total lockdown, it was total lockdown. But now I think we're allowed 100 people.
Okay, that's good. 100 is a nice number.
At least 100. So that should cover most events, shouldn't it? And we've got theatres open and cinemas are back open and all that kind of thing. But you're supposed to keep a little bit of distance. Well, I don't think we even need to do that now.
So more or less normal, but internally oriented, let's say.
Internal and normal.
You don't get people from outside.
No.
Let's give 2 more minutes because of the time differences, and then we start. I'll do a brief introduction. I'll read the invitation letter for recording purposes. We are being recorded right now. I just started the YouTube channel as well. The link is in the public chat, and if anyone wants to share it on the social media, please do so. Yeah, let's give 2 more minutes because there are some signing in right now.
Hey, David.
Hey, Shri, how are you? How are you, brother?
Sorry, I've been very, very occupied with work last couple of weeks. I think I missed so many really great lectures. Hope everything's well with you and the family.
All fine, all fine.
Right.
And
we'll talk later.
Missed you. We missed you.
Thank you, brother. I miss you guys. I miss you.
Hello, Shri.
Hello, brother Renan. Good to see you, sir.
Yes, good to see you. We missed you.
Thank you. Miss you too.
I was just going to ask David about you.
Well, ask no more. I'm here.
Okay, very nice to see you.
See how loud you are. Everyone's asking for
you. Did I hear Sister Cleo over there in the background?
It was Denise.
Oh, yes, Denise. Nice to meet you. I mean, well, figuratively, nice to meet you again.
Yes, nice to meet you. Good to see you back again.
Thank you. Thanks. Just remind me, David, and hello, brother Mike. It's nice to, I mean, the last lecture I attended of yours was, of course, the Grand Lodge of California one.
Which one was that?
The Grand Lodge of the failure to set up the Grand Lodge of a Grand Lodge in the United States.
And the conservatives. Yeah, right.
In fact, I don't know, David, has Brother Mike given that lecture here? Because, I mean, it's not every day you get a past master of QC Lodge, a Prestonian lecturer, and also Norman B. Spencer awardee. You know, when you get hold of him, you should just squeeze him dry. Get a few more lectures out of him.
Well, he already been generous to deliver 2 lectures with us, and it's now, we should understand, 12 o'clock in the, it's
Yeah, I
already
know, I
past
saw
that.
that. Yeah, that's just
Time
amazing.
difference
I
is
mean,
great.
everybody in the Antipodes is doing that for you, David. Just think about it, because all the lectures start after midnight for them in Australia and New Zealand.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Um,
And we will have
Sri,
brother,
Sri, just a moment
okay.
though. Let me just interject for one moment. Sri, let me
Yes, sir.
mark your card about Mike Kearsley. He'll talk to anybody.
Yeah. You might be interested, by the way, that I was at a meeting, an Australian Zoom meeting last night, and they open and close the lodge. They dress formally and wear regalia,
Wow.
and they use ritual. Yes, they're allowed to do that in Melbourne, in Victoria. We're not allowed to do that in New Zealand. And
Mike, is that the Endeavour Lodge?
It's called Amalthea.
Oh, Amalfi. Okay.
Yeah.
The Endeavour Lodge also is supposed to do that.
Endeavour,
Something
yes,
very similar.
Yeah. The Endeavour. Sorry, I didn't hear what you say. Yes,
Yeah,
Endeavour.
Endeavour Lodge.
Does that as well. Yeah.
I've been attending their meeting. I think I missed the last 2 meetings of theirs, but that's where I kind of got the overall idea of how exactly they do the signs or like showcase the signs. And that is what, when we started doing our virtual meeting, I just literally copied that. I said, that's it. We are not going to show any signs, obviously. So we will use the sign of fidelity to ensure that all the signs are given in that format.
Yeah. Yes, exactly right.
Yeah, but Mark Mason's Hall has permitted. I know that we are having my mother consistory is having a meeting, an election meeting on the 5th, because Mark Mason's Hall has permitted business meetings to take place. I know UGLE has not for the craft, but we are going to be opening and doing conducting our business. Obviously, no signs and no words and no rituals, but administrative business can be conducted.
If we hadn't have had Zoom, we probably would have had drive-in meetings, wouldn't we? Like you would all stay in your car and just have a sound coming through. I think that's what we would have done in some cases.
Mike, that would work in Australia and New Zealand. It won't work in Bombay, where there's no space for 10 cars to be parked next to each other.
Hey, we can do it in BKC. Somewhere in some corner we can actually think about, and instead of the knocks, we will obviously honk.
Oh yeah, that's a good innovation. I like that.
Which unfortunately will get drained out with the other honks which are happening around. Like, who? I don't know which sign was this. Was it the first degree, the third degree? Which is it?
True.
All right.
David,
all right.
We are also starting tomorrow on the 1st of October.
Oh, wow.
Meetings, official meetings in Zoom. Very short opening, very short closing. The Grand Lodge send a written paper to all of us by email saying that it will start tomorrow, just to keep the brethren together, you know. Apprentices and the other fellow crafts.
Okay, with your permission, I will now mute everyone and do my brief introduction, do cover for the recording purposes, and then we give the floor to Brother Mike. Brother Mike, you can unmute yourself. Otherwise, everyone is now muted. So, welcome everyone. Today is Saperiaude number 87, and the topic is the Northeast Corner, Masonic Fact or Fiction. In continuation of the series of public lectures, we have the honor to host worshipful brother Dr. Mike Kearsley, who was the provincial grand orator of Middlesex. He was initiated into Freemasonry in the Hawera Lodge 34 in Hawera, Taranaki, New Zealand, and was passed and raised in Mayerau Lodge number 391 in Christchurch, New Zealand. Later, he joined the David Bonner Lodge in 96-78, the Musicians Lodge of the province of Middlesex, under the English Constitution, becoming its master in 2010 and secretary. He is a member of the Temple of Athens Research Lodge 9541, He became master in 2013. The Feltham Lodge 7307, becoming master in 2012. Quattro Coronati Lodge 2076, and London Stone Royal Arch Chapter 2541, becoming MEZ in 2012. He has always had an interest in Masonic research and was a member of the Correspondence Circle of Masters and Past Masters Research, Lodge Christchurch, New Zealand. He has therefore produced many papers and presentations for Masonic audiences. The Promise of Middlesex is part of the National Oration Scheme and continues to provide over 100 presentations of 2 lodges each year. In 2011, he was awarded with the Norman Spencer Prize by Quattro Coronati Lodge for a paper on the formation of the Grand Lodge of New Zealand. So today we have the honor to host Brother Mike Kearsley. I will just briefly remind everyone the very simple rules that we adhere here in Sapere Aude. We don't discuss politics, we don't discuss religion, and we don't discuss any interjurisdictional issues. The lectures are recorded and streamed on YouTube live. These lectures are public. We allow in male and female, members or non-members. Everyone is welcome to participate. Who are interested to learn more about the Freemasonry, its history, philosophy, and everything else that concerns Freemasonry or its origins. So, having said that, and having kept these simple rules in mind, it is my utmost pleasure to give the floor to Mike. And I should emphasize that right now in New Zealand, it's over midnight, and it is additional dedication and generosity by Mike to give the lecture. Find time for us, for our Sapere Aude international audience. As always does David Slater, who also joined us just recently somewhere here. So once again, Brother Mike, floor is all yours.
Thank you. I will go to share screen. Is that working?
Not yet. Yeah,
How's
it's
that?
working. It's
Good.
coming. Yeah, that's it. We see it.
Let me do this. Jolly good. How's that? You can see that?
Yeah, full screen is
Good.
fine.
Thank you very much. Everybody can hear me? That's great. Okay, well, thank you for inviting me to present. And I'm going to talk to you tonight about the Northeast Corner. One of the most memorable, I think, of all of the charges that we have in Freemasonry is in the first degree, and it's the charge in the Northeast Corner. I love giving it. And in emulation ritual, it says words to this effect: to the initiate. It is customary at the erection of all stately and superb edifices to lay the first or foundation stone at the northeast corner of the building. You, being newly admitted into Freemasonry, are thus placed in the northeast part of the lodge. And there's looking to the northeast part of the lodge, typical lodge rooms. We're looking from the southwest towards the northeast. And the charge continues: you are there figuratively to represent that stone. And from the foundation that you've laid this evening, may you raise a superstructure, perfect in its parts and honorable to the builder. Words might be slightly different in different rituals, but most have that. Now, clearly, the initiate is not being advised to return home and to start a loft conversion. The superstructure is clearly a metaphor for starting a new life. You are laying a symbolic foundation, if you wish, for your new life as a Freemason. And in the modern ceremony, there are 2 very clear components in this charge. Firstly, there is the laying of a foundation stone or foundation. And in this part of the ceremony, the candidate becomes a just and upright man and mason. And in the second part, the initiate is asked to support the cause of charity. And he finds himself, of course, as you will remember, poor and penniless because he's been divested of all money and metallic substances. before he entered the lodge room, but of course proves himself willing to cheerfully embrace that virtue, charity, which he has professed to admire. But where did we get it from that foundation stones are laid in the northeast corner? And therefore, the ceremony, the Masonic ceremony, should be carried out in the northeast corner. Why the northeast? Why not the southwest? Why not anywhere that happens to be convenient? Well, some people will give you a very clear answer to this. Neville Barker Cryer, I'm sure many of you know about him, this is what he had to say. The answer is that in all medieval churches, the northeast, was where the Easter sepulchre lay. A symbolic tomb of Christ was set, and from here the first light of Easter came. Easter proclaimed the great promise of God's love, care for his people, and it fits well with this stress on charity and brotherly love of which the worshipful master is speaking. And I can show you some pictures of what we're talking about. So for example, here's the outline of a typical cathedral or church, with the altar in the east. That's to the right, obviously, of this picture. And you can see here where we have the sepulchre, the Easter sepulchre is supposed to be. Let me show you some pictures. That's an Easter sepulchre in Bosham Church. That's an Easter sepulchre in Slowham Church. Here's another one in Sompting Church. Very small, this one, but it's an Easter sepulchre. And here's a rather more ornate, larger one in West Hampnet Church. And you might say, well, are these in all churches? No, they're not. Every church does not necessarily have an Easter sepulchre these days. But the charge in the Northeast is in one form or another used in all of the rituals that I've come across. And you may be interested to know that in England at the moment, there are something like 50 or 60 different printed rituals that are in use by different lodges, and they all contain this charge in the Northeast. And here in New Zealand, of course, exactly the same. Now, in some instances, a large stone, a rough ashlar, is actually placed at the spot you can see here in the Northeast. And the initiate forms a square around that stone with his feet whilst this charge is given to him. So he really is, in a sense, standing beside a foundation stone. Well, have we always done this? Has this always been the case in Masonic ritual? Well, you know that, of course, ritual wasn't permitted to be printed until about the mid-1800s. So in order to know what the ritual was about before then, we have to look at these various Masonic exposures to give us some idea as to what the ritual might have been before this. That's it. So, in Samuel Pritchard's exposure called Masonry Dissected, which was published in about 1730, there is no reference at all to a foundation stone or to the candidate laying a foundation. The ritual, in fact, is presented as a series of questions and answers, similar to the sort of questions that we ask candidates today before they can move to the second degree or the third degree, but far more extensive and far more detailed. And we know, for example, as an aside, that in the absence of official printed rituals, that it was Masons themselves who often bought the exposures, because, of course, through the exposures, they could see what the ritual was and the words that they were supposed to learn. And this has gone on ever since. For example, Walton Hanna's Darkness Visible, which was in the sort of 1950s and 60s, printed all the ritual, and they knew that the major buyers of Darkness Visible were Masons trying to learn their own ritual, so that you could learn it without trying to remember what certain cryptic letters meant. But however, in 3 distinct knocks, another exposure produced around 1760, there is no mention whatsoever of a foundation stone, but instead we have the following as one of the responses. I stood in the northwest corner of the lodge. And with the instruction of a brother, I said, Master, Senior, and Junior Warden, Senior and Junior Deacon, and the rest of the brethren of this lodge, I return your thanks for the honor you have done me in making me a Mason and admitting me as a member of this worthy society. Question was then put to the initiate. What was said to you then? Well, the master called me up to the northeast corner of the lodge, or at his right hand. Did he present you with anything? Yes, he presented me with an apron, which he put on me. So the only reason for moving to the northeast in this exposure is to be invested with an apron by the master. Still no foundation stone, no request for charity. Now in Jarkin and Boaz, an authentic key to the door of Freemasonry, another exposure published in 1762, exactly the same pattern is followed. No foundation stone, no request for charity, only the investing with an apron. In Hiram, or the Grand Master Key to the door of both ancient and modern Freemasonry, which was published in 1777, the following occurs. The ritual says, the ceremony being now ended, he, the candidate, is desired to pay the usual fees of being made, which offering to do so by putting his hand into his pocket, he finds no money. And this generally causes a laugh amongst the brethren, as all kinds of metal had been taken from him before he was admitted into the room. But being now restored, he discharges his fees, and an apron being brought him, for which he pays a shilling, and a list of the lodges, he is congratulated by his brethren. So by this time, the demand for money has been included in the charge, though this is apparently not for charity, but rather to pay your lodge fees. And the foundation stone, completely absent. And this, of course, was an exposure presenting both modern and ancient Freemasonry rituals. Now, in 1825, Richard Carlisle produced his Manual of Freemasonry, another exposure. And it had the rituals of all of the craft degrees, the Royal Arch, Knight Templar, Mark, and all others, some of which we don't do today, the Priestly Order of Israel, and so on. And this exposure contains the lectures and questions and answers of earlier exposures, but it also presents much more the words during the actual ceremonies and in the first degree. And in the first degree ceremony is the following. The Worshipful Master, Brother Junior Deacon, you will place our brother, name, at the northeast part of the lodge. Brother, name, it is customary at the erection of all stately and superb edifices to lay the first or foundation stone at the northeast corner of the building. You, being newly admitted into Masonry, are placed in the northeast part of the lodge to represent figuratively that stone. And from the foundation laid this evening, may you raise a superstructure perfect in its parts and honorable to its builder. Yes, the ritual is virtually identical to that used today, and it continues with the familiar test of the newly made brother's principles by also making a claim on his charity. The initiate has already been invested with his apron by the senior warden before being moved to the northeast corner, exactly as in today's ceremony. So we can see from this that somewhere between 1777 and 1825, the modern ritual was created. Well, the union of the two Grand Lodges occurred in 1813, and this was supported by a lodge called the Lodge of Reconciliation, which ran under the leadership, the mastership of this man, Dr. Samuel Hemming, who was also master of the Lodge of Harmony, a lodge that I was a member of, 255 in Middlesex. Lodge of Harmony started in 1785, I think it was. What Hemming was trying to do was to regularize and standardize all of those competing rituals that I was talking about, but without officially writing anything down. He was still prohibited from actually writing anything down. Not easy to standardize things when you're not allowed to write them down. And official printed rituals were not produced until well after Hemming, well after Carlyle, and so on. But it is clear that a standard version appears to have been devised. Now, assuming that Hemming and his team didn't actually invent this ritual and put it in, and that has been known, it suggests that some form of the ritual, similar to today, must have already been being used. And the idea has been created from somewhere that it's customary or traditional to lay the first or foundation stone in a building in the Northeast. Well, where did that idea develop? That foundation stones are laid in the Northeast of a building. And are we in fact talking about a foundation stone, which is underground and the foundations? Or are we talking, for example, about a cornerstone, which you will see at the northeast corner, but above ground, underground? And here, for example, are some cornerstones. They're clearly not foundation stones because there's building underneath them. And of course, the foundations are underneath them. Well, the high symbolic importance of both foundation and cornerstones is very well established. I guess you have to start a building somewhere, and a corner probably seems as good a place to start as anywhere. And the argument that's often given about this is that if you start at a corner, the builders can work in two directions at the same time, at right angles, as it were. And in fact, if you read Bernard Jones's book, The Freemason's Guide and Companion, he suggests that the reason why it was the Northeast is that the sun rises in the Northeast in England on St. John's Day, June the 24th, which of course is an auspicious day for Freemasons. And that by starting work in the Northeast, a Mason is assured of the rising sun. Well, you know, I've lived in England most of my life, I think a good part of my life. When did the sun ever rise in the Northeast? Not as far as I know. But anyway, well, Bernard Jones is convinced that it rises in the Northeast. If it rises, as I think it does, more in the Southeast, wouldn't that argue then that we should be having the ceremony in the Southeast, not the Northeast? And we would have it in the Northeast in New Zealand or in Australia, of course, which was not considered when they were writing these rituals. You might be interested, as a little aside, that when the Brits decided to do all of the development of Australia and New Zealand and sent out all of the building plans, you know, to build things, nobody considered that we were actually in the southern hemisphere, and of course they built them south facing so that they would get the sun. And we had to tell them, say, no, actually the sun is in the north in Australia and New Zealand. And they said, just turn the building around. Well, there you go. Anyway, here's a cornerstone, and this, of course, is pretty high up in a corner. It's not even on the ground. It's sunken. So not only is it not a foundation stone, there's a hell of a lot of the building being built before you can even put that stone on. And I suspect the stone has been put on later and so on. But anyway, the idea of a cornerstone or a foundation stone became a colloquial term, it's certainly even in biblical times, to describe important things that are happening, especially leaders or prominent men. You know, he is the cornerstone of our group, or this is the cornerstone of our group. And there are innumerable societies and organizations today who have that word in their title. If you want to check it out on the internet, you will literally find hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of groups that are called the cornerstone or cornerstone. But in fact, was the building started where the cornerstones are eventually placed? In this case of this building here, are we now looking at the spot where the building started? Well, I guess if we want to get some kind of answer to this, to our first degree charge, we could have a look at building customs and traditions, and particularly, say, the older building traditions, say from the 18th century and back, when the original rituals were being developed. And in particular, was it then traditional to lay a foundation stone or a cornerstone put a cornerstone of these stately and superb edifices at the northeast corner. Well, even before the advent of Freemasonry, we know that there was a lot of ritual performed at these stone layings. Now, we're talking here, of course, about important buildings. We're not talking about an outside toilet here or something. You know, we're talking about something that's important to the community. For example, one early English record shows at Vale Royal Abbey, which is in Delamere Forest in Cheshire, and this was around 1338, and the account reads as follows. Afterwards, in the same 6th year, to wit, on the Ides of August, that's the 13th of August, AD 1277, the aforenamed Edward, the most illustrious King of England, in an assembly of all the greatest people of the kingdom, with his own hands puts the first stone in place where the great altar was to be built. Eleanor, also the Queen, who was likewise present there, placed 2 stones, one for herself and the other for her son Alfonso, in the same spot. So what this is suggesting is several stones. We're talking about a stone that a woman could lift 2 of them and put them down. So you're probably talking about a little rock of some sort. And they have laid these in the east and some distance inside the planned structure where the altar is going to be built. Well, and what we also get from this is that obviously important people are involved when you do this ceremony. And here's a typical stone, a commemorative stone of some sort, or a cornerstone from India. So let me digress a little to reflect on the stone laying ceremonies. The laying of these foundation stones or cornerstones of important buildings by royalty, presidents, ministers, local dignitaries, and so on, seems to have been recorded since early biblical times. And this has continued. It continued through Europe and indeed to the present day. A couple of examples. 1446, King Henry VI laid himself the foundation stone of King's College Chapel in Cambridge. Of course, it's King's College, it's named after him, and you can be certain that King Henry didn't actually lift a big stone himself and put it in place, but he probably walked over and tapped it with something and said, "I lay you," with all dignity, and so on and so on. In 1880, the then Prince of Wales, who was Grand Master of the Freemasons, interestingly, laid two cornerstones of Truro Cathedral. Now you think, well, both in the same corner? It doesn't tell us. Or in 2 different corners? And why do you want 2 cornerstones? I don't know, but we might know a little bit later. And interestingly, what's recorded at the time is both he and all of a considerable entourage following all wore their full Masonic regalia for the occasion. Now, we have a really interesting story with the Bank of England. The builders who built the Bank of England, who were called Messrs. Dunn and Townsend, having built the building, or about to build the building, were very upset, miffed, you might say, very upset, that without even consulting them, the governor of the Bank of England went and laid a foundation stone himself somewhere under the building and wouldn't tell them where it was. And they had wanted a full Masonic ceremony because Messrs. Dunn and Townsend, who were stonemasons, were also Freemasons meeting at the local lodge, which met literally just behind the Bank of England. Well, so upset were they by this that without telling the governor, they went and proceeded to lay a second foundation stone without telling him where that one was. And we know that because when they were doing some renovations in 1929, we found the second foundation stone, but nobody's ever found the first one yet. So one day we might find it. So you can see that there was some what shall I say? There was kudos in laying foundation stones, and the idea of having Freemasons or a Masonic ceremony had already developed. They wanted ritual and they wanted pageantry. And of course, if it's an important building, then the religion gets its share. And you will lay the ceremony, lay the stone with religious ceremony. And you can see that this works perfectly if it's like a cathedral or a church or a school, maybe, that you are creating. But increasingly, the church got itself involved in any major building, because inevitably there are going to be prayers and a religious ceremony, blessing the structure, hoping that nothing bad ever happens there, that it fulfills its destiny and all of that kind of thing. And this makes complete sense in society when religious commitment was a lot stronger than perhaps it is now. So the coupling of Masonic and clerical involvement developed very, very strongly in the 19th century, when Freemasonry, English Freemasonry in particular, became part of the establishment, which it did after 1813. With the establishment came the Anglican Church and all of that meant. So Freemasons were often called upon, together with Anglican ministers and bishops, to lay foundation stones for such as Anglican churches or schools, constructions that they'd often contributed to. They paid for them in many cases, which is rather interesting when you reflect that today the Anglican Church is showing, shall we say, a little discomfort about Freemasonry. It's interesting to reflect that not so very long ago, the king, the archbishops, the bishops, and most of the clergy were all Freemasons, and Freemasonry was actively involved in supporting the church, supporting church schools, and laying the foundation stones for these. But of course, added to a religious ceremony has often been the idea of some kind of sacrifice. The Masonic ceremony, as you will know, has often involved the pouring of oil and wine to represent various qualities, which it's hoped will be imbued into the building. But earlier laying ceremonies have often involved some real sacrifice. And W. Simpson in AQC 68 recorded that the Burmese kings of old used to have human beings buried alive at the four corners of the walls of their capital city when they were laying the foundations, in order that the spirits of these deceased would keep watch over the population and by their occult influence foil the attempts of any invaders to force an entry into the city. You would have thought that they would have been so peeved off about being buried alive that the last thing they would want to do is to protect the city, but there you go. And it was customary with the Hindu Rajas to lay the foundations of public buildings with blood. This was certainly the case with the Taj Mahal, Shah Jahan, who had several animals slaughtered while he was constructing that, and their blood was shed on the foundations of the city, and so it goes on. Always these wonderful stories about the pyramids, aren't there, that people were actually, crushed and killed and put in and whatever. And in fact, Simpson suggests a number of occasions when the architect or builder was the completion sacrifice or narrowly escaped this fate. And he includes such structures as Roslin Chapel, the Abbey at Saint-Ouen, and St. Basil's Cathedral in Moscow, and quite a few more. Well, this certainly provides a very interesting link with the Masonic allegory of the third degree and the death of the builder. But there is no suggestion, I hasten to add, that Freemasons, as opposed to stonemasons, have ever included any real, actual sacrifices in their foundation stone ceremonies. So it's just allegorical. I'm sure you could probably name a few old masons who you'd be quite happy to use as a sacrifice, but Grand Lodge is not going to let you do it. So stop thinking about it. Now, Of course, ceremonies were often used for political and cultural purposes, because, you know, in laying a foundation stone, a society could be symbolically starting some kind of political or cultural program. And an example, as you see here, could be the construction of the stadium at Nuremberg. So this place is going to be used for mass rallies and all sorts of things. And you could see that you could do that for, say, a new parliament building or a sports stadium such as Wembley, etc. And here we have, obviously, Adolf Hitler. It's very clear that they are not laying the foundation stone because it's above ground. And in fact, the stone that these real stonemasons with their hats, these are not Freemasons, obviously, but the stone is not going to stay there. It's obviously going to be taken and put on the wall somewhere of the building when it's actually, the stadium, when it's actually constructed. For English Masons, a good example of this would have to be the building of Freemasons Hall in Great Queen Street, which commenced in 1927. As you know, it was a war memorial. It was to commemorate the Great War, 1914-18. And the story of the construction of Freemasons Hall is quite an interesting story of what you do at some of these stone laying things. So here we have, on the right, you have Freemasons Hall in Great Queen Street, 1929. But what they decided is there's a limited number of people that you can actually get standing on a building site or around a stone. So what they decided to do was that they would have a special meeting held at the Albert Hall, which you can see on the left, and they would have a ceremony there of laying a foundation stone on the stage, but they would use a mock-up stone. It was a real stone, but it wasn't the stone, if I can put it that way, because the real stone would simultaneously and by electrical means be lowered into place where it is, indeed it is now, in the presence of special representatives who would then hurry back to the Albert Hall to announce the stone is laid, just as the mock-up stone had been well and truly laid. And of course, to get into the Albert Hall, you paid. And the more you paid, the better the seat you got. And there was the hint of name and shame about this. What, the Masons? Surely not. Well, there you go. And of course, what they did is they laid the stone at the entrance thing. And if you look over here, you can, in these, under this, you can see just here, a little stone. So let's have a look at it. And here you are. This stone was laid by Field Marshal, His Royal Highness, the Duke of Connaught, Most Worshipful Grand Master. Well, of course, it wasn't, because the Duke of Connaught was actually in the Albert Hall laying a mock stone while some other people were laying a real stone or putting a real stone here. But of course, they realized what a great money spinner this was. You know, you get a lot of people to pay a lot of money to come to the ceremony. So they thought, well, why don't we do it again? So what they did is they had an opening stone. And as you can see, the Duke of Connaught was called upon again to have another opening. And again, you paid for a better seat and so on and so on. And here they are, if you look there and there, under the big lamp standards, are the two stones, the so-called foundation stone and the opening stone. And you may be interested that they are located between the northwest and the southwest. Neither of them are in the northeast. So even the Masons can't figure out where the northeast is. Anyway, but there you go. Now, of course, in these ceremonies, it's always good to have some women in it. You can't exclude them. And if you go back in history, of course, there were women who were specially brought in for these occasions, such as the Vestal Virgins and so on, who would be part of the ceremony. And of course, the fact that you have young women, good-looking women, maybe suggests some idea of purity or rebirth or creation or something of that nature. And of course, they look good. And here you can see Nancy Reagan, who was the president's wife at the time, laying a foundation stone for the Air Force One pavilion, which I guess is the pavilion that they're going to put the plane in. And so she's, and of course, if you can't be this high up market, as it were, you'll get the mayor's wife or somebody, local dignitaries, to do it. And we see this, for instance, as well with launching a ship, where you try to get a woman always to launch a ship, and a ship is always female, her. God bless her and all who sail in her. And of course, we have the ritual, if you wish, of pouring the blood or some liquid over, which of course we don't do these days. We will use champagne, and it's considered very, very unlucky if the champagne bottle doesn't break. And here, of course, on the left, you have a really, really important lady who is obviously launching something that's really, really important. I know the cynical amongst you will say it's probably because they had difficulty finding virgins, but keep that thought to yourself. Anyway, so now here we have a medal ceremony. And of course, we have today medal ceremonies like when we have the Olympics or Formula One or the Tour de France. And what we always get on stage for the victor is a couple of good-looking women on either side, dressed identically, who will kiss him and put the garland on him, and all to the winner. I don't think so these days. I don't think he gets the fringe benefits these days. But there you go. Anyway, and another thing, of course, that's traditional with laying foundation stones or something is to put some kind of time capsule, put something in the foundations. Some relics, perhaps, from a saint, if you can do that. Of course, if you're opening a church called St. Joseph's, it would be great if you have a bit of St. Joseph to put in there or whatever. Or if you haven't got that, you can put a message to future generations. You can put in human or animal bones with the foundation stones. And these are sometimes placed all over the place. For instance, in St. George's Chapel at Windsor, they found lots of them in the roof. They put them up there. And of course, many of the churches hold the relics in a vault in the altar itself, or they distribute them through the church. Now, you may remember from your history book that a certain King Henry VIII was responsible for what was called the dissolution of the monasteries. In other words, he needed money, and he went around all the monasteries and he kicked out the monks, and he stripped the lead off the roof, and he took all their money and threw them out into the snow, etc. But of course, these monasteries made a lot of their living. They made livings in two ways. Firstly, they prayed. They did a lot of praying, and because they had carefully worked out how many prayers it needed to get certain souls out of purgatory, get you into heaven. So how many masses could be said, and that's what they did all day. They prayed. So you could get 10 prayers for, I don't know, a pound or whatever. And they would do, they really did do specials and eat, sort of 10 for the price of 9, all of this kind of thing. And the other thing that they did as well was that they had relics. So people used to go and travel long distances, and that's exactly what Chaucer's Canterbury Tale is all about. They're all heading off to Canterbury to pray there and to see the relics. And in fact, we have instances of some of these monasteries doing midnight raids and stealing the relics from other monasteries to get their relics and to get the visitors. Now, of course, once these monasteries were taken over, dissolved, as you might say, we were able then to quantify the relics that we had. And unfortunately, it revealed certain problems. For example, 5 thumbs of St. Peter stretches belief a little bit. They found the foreskin of baby Jesus. Yes, okay. There were enough pieces of the cross to build a small house, for example. And of course, the classic was the holy blood of Hales, in which if you prayed hard enough and you gave enough money, then you would see in a glass jar, you would see water turn into the blood of Christ. Of course, it was all done by trick mirrors and with red glass and so on and so on. So a lot of this was revealed about these relics, but never mind. But we still do it, don't we? We still want to put various things in these capsules. And of course, coins are very commonly included, metal objects, which will withstand the elements of time, whereas paper, like newspapers and certificates, are probably less likely to survive. And I wonder how many of you, if you've done an extension to your house or you've changed a room or something, have left something, you know, in the wall or underneath as a little memento. We were doing this one time in a house that we had here in New Zealand, and we were changing an entire wall and building an extension, everything. And I had moved the telephone onto one of the joists on the wall, and then we put the boards in, you know, to board in the wall. And we were just having a tea break when the phone rang, and we looked around, and of course, the phone was now inside the wall. So we had a choice, like, do we take the wall out or bugger it? We said, so we just cut the wire, and we've now left our own little relic in the wall, a telephone for somebody to find in 50 years' time or whatever it happens to be. And of course, these days, you're rather unlikely to leave a pot of gold coins or part of your grandfather's skull in this, but anyway. But what the Freemasons did is they added all of this stuff, if they could, into the various ceremonies, either real or symbolically. And over in Cheshire, for instance, the Provincial Grand Lodge turned out to fix a keystone over the window of a new church, probably a drier place to leave a time capsule. And in it, they put coins of the present reign, together with a description of the day's proceedings, and of course, the names of all of the local authorities and the senior Masons who had been involved in the ceremony. We always love to put our name in somewhere. It's the equivalent of, you know, Kilroy was here. And the graffiti artists of today have got a long history way back. In fact, if you go back to Pompeii, of course, when Vesuvius erupted and the whole town was buried, and when they managed to clear it, quite a number of the walls are covered with graffiti, basically saying Cassius was here, you know, or somebody is a fat slob, or somebody, you know, whatever. Anyway, so stones, relics, and artifacts are being placed in the ceremony somewhere. But let's get back to the original question. Do you actually start a building? Do you do all of this in the northeast corner, and do you put your time capsule and have your Vestal Virgins in the northeast corner? Well, if you think about it, a more sensible place to start a building would be surely the center, because from the center you could measure to the corners, to the walls, you could measure everything. If we want to be Masonic about it, we could say the center is that point from which the master builder cannot err, because you can measure from every place. And a classic example of that has to be something like Temple Mount. Now, here's Temple Mount in Jerusalem, with the present mosque on the left, and with a sort of artist's impression of what King Solomon's temple would be like on the right. Now, as you know, one chapter in my ANZ MRC tour book and my talk in a couple of days' time suggests that there never was a temple on Temple Mount, but never mind. If there was a temple, it makes sense to have something from the center. Now, there are numerous records in English ecclesiastical architecture of tombs of founders being placed in churches, but interestingly, in the north wall, anywhere in the north, not just the northeast. And in many cases where a tomb has been found elsewhere, it was actually moved from the north wall. And you know, there were some people who, usually women, who wanted to be walled up, usually in the north wall, so that they could see the altar. We call these people anchoresses, and there was one at a church in Shear, which is near where I used to live. Now, here's the wall of the church. You see this here. This is like a doorway, that you could go into that doorway within the space of the wall and be walled up. And you see that little sign there is this sign here. And if you look from inside the church, look here, there's a little hole. That doorway is on the other side over there. And that's what it looks like. And this Christine lived in the wall and spent her day looking through that hole at the altar, praying, and so on and so on. They were indeed religious zealots, you might say, of the time. Today, of course, we're probably much more likely to call them mentally disturbed and to try to get some psychiatric help for them. But it was quite common it was not common, but there were quite a few people did this in the Middle Ages. And Christine, who was the anchoress of Shia in this thing, after a while decided that she'd had enough of this, and she came out. And then when she came out, she decided that the world was such a terrible place that she went back. She preferred to stay there, and food was put in and waste was taken out, and she lived there for quite a while. Anyway, so the North and the Northeast seems to have some kind of meaning, but religious meaning. But I think we're starting to come to a conclusion that this story about the Northeast as the traditional place to lay a foundation stone, if indeed a stone is laid at all, can be questioned. Well, I've said Freemasons get increasingly called upon to lay foundation stones. And of course, the Masons, if you're going to have a ritual, have to decide, where are we going to do this? Where are we going to have this ritual? And the Masons come up with the idea that the Northeast sounds like a good place to do it. And then they will say that we're laying a foundation stone in the Northeast, and then quite often actually lay it somewhere else. So anyway, let's have a look at a couple of foundation ceremonies. Here's one in Sydney with the Masons. Not a very good picture, but it's Sydney University. You can't really see the Masons. Clearly, it's not a foundation stone. They're not in the foundations. Here's one in Scotland. Now you can see the Masons with their aprons. And here is another one in China. And clearly you can see the aprons and the collars. And very typically, you have what was called a goat, I think, that thing that you've got there, which will lower and raise a stone, and you sort of symbolically put this stone down. You'll see the sort of thing. I mean, here's a typical one. This was the laying of the so-called foundation stone in Beamish in Durham, and with full Masonic ritual and regalia, etc. And it looks like you're laying a stone, but as you can see quite clearly, you're not laying it on a foundation at all. And here's a question: whenever you go into a lodge room, if I give a talk like this, I have a little compass and I check, and very seldom is the northeast part of the lodge room in the northeast. So when we say you're in the northeast, it's symbolic of what we're doing. So we are coming to the conclusion, in my opinion, that the whole thing is symbolic, and it's all been made up by the Masons to fit their ritual. So nothing new there. And an interesting case of operative masonry meets speculative masonry was the occasion of the construction of the Church of St. Martin in the Fields in 1722. There's the church. And the Weekly Journal of May 1722, May the 26th, reported this: as the first stone of the foundation of the Church of St. Martin's in the Field underground was sometime laid on the behalf and by the command of His Majesty by the Bishop of Salisbury, so the first stone of the foundation at the same corner above ground, being 12 foot above the other, was laid with a great deal of ceremony by the Society of Freemasons, who on that occasion were very generous to the workmen, and afterwards the craftsmen went to the tavern to drink to the king and the craft. So here we have two stones, a foundation stone and a cornerstone 12 foot above the other, and we're given all the details about the ceremony, except which corner of the building it was in, It doesn't tell us whether it was the northeast corner or not. And in fact, the architect of St. Martin in the Fields, his original plan was for a round building. So where do you put the foundation stone when you're going to do that? And Anderson's Constitutions, which appeared a year later in 1723, mentions this event with St. Martin in the Fields, with the added information that an inscription was cut into the foundation stone. Again, Anderson doesn't bother to tell us whether it was in the northeast or not, and doesn't bother to tell us what was put on the foundation stone. Now, until 1919, we actually had an approved procedure for the laying of a foundation stone by Freemasons. It's in the Book of Constitutions. One of the few surviving links between operative and ourselves, if there was a link. For some reason, and I have no idea why, after the First World War, we stopped doing it. The English stopped doing it. The Americans didn't. And the Americans continue to be involved in the laying of foundation stones, which they always do in the first degree. They will inevitably be laying a cornerstone rather than a foundation stone. And here you see them at the ceremony doing it. So it's still happening. They're still talking about the northeast corner. And clearly you can see from these people, these Americans here, they are nowhere near a new building or the northeast corner of any kind of building whatsoever. They're somewhere convenient, and it's going to be a commemorative stone, which could be put anywhere in the building. And I'm going to finish up by telling you the story of a rather special stone laying ceremony in England. And this was from Preston in Lancashire in 1882, when they were laying the foundation stone of the Harris Public Library and Museum. There it is, the Harris Public Library and Museum, a large structure which would benefit the whole of Preston, etc. And quite rightly, they wanted the Freemasons to be part of it. Here's what they said. On the morning of Tuesday, the September the 5th, 1882, the Duke of Cambridge, accompanied by the Earl of Latham, arrived at Preston railway station. After an enthusiastic reception and an inspection of the troops, His Royal Highness left the station with an escort of dragoon guards. The 5th Lancashire Artillery Volunteers formed a guard of honour at the town hall. About 2,000 Freemasons took part in the laying of the foundation stone. They assembled at the Christchurch schoolrooms and left the school about noon, attired in full Masonic regalia and jewels. The procession was headed by the headquarters band of the 5th Lancashire Artillery Volunteers. At the arrival at the site, the approach of the Earl of Latham was heralded by a flourish of trumpets. The Guild Mayor, Brother Edmund Burley, made his appearance with the Duke of Cambridge and with several noblemen and ladies. The architect, Brother James Hibbert, bearing the plans of the intended structure, took up his position on the west side of the stone. The ceremony commenced with the singing of the hymn, "The Spacious Firmament on High," which was led by the choir of St. James's Church under the leadership of their organist, Brother C.J. Yates. Accompanied by the band of the Royal Marines, Brother C.R. Jackson, chairman of the Harris Trustees, presented a silver trowel to the Earl of Latham and requested him to lay the stone. The Earl of Latham, having declared the objects of the assembly, prayer was offered by the Reverend Brother T.B. Spencer, and the anthem, "Except the Lord build a house," placed under the stone, and the Masonic treasurer deposited a file containing coins of the realm, etc. The found, we have 2,000 Freemasons, and we have, as part of that ceremony, we have the stone, we have women, we have time capsules, we've got the clergy, we've got the singing, we've got the music. Everybody's turned out. It's a big occasion. And you can see the building itself there, this very fine Palladian building, which was going to be the public library, etc. So that's perhaps one of the reasons why Freemasonry was so popular. It presented itself in this kind of way, and we stopped doing it. The Americans continued doing it, and the Shriners in particular continued to do it, and the Knight Templars continued to have parades and so on and so on. Very impressive. Well, maybe not quite so much, because I'll finish with this. There's an amusing account of the same ceremony, which was published by the supplement to the Preston Chronicle of September 1882. That is the other paper, the smaller paper. And it might suggest why the Masonic ceremonies might have declined a little bit in popularity. This is what it had to say. The spectacular festival was greatly marred by the oppressive dullness of the morning and the persistent fall of rain, of fine penetrating rain. This, of course, is Lancashire, right? So the weather is not good. To the varied strains of music and at the occasional call of the fussy officials of the Freemasons in their full regalia and wearing all their jewels, the people filed into the canvas-covered space and took their places. Then came the high officers of the Masonic order, followed by the Duke of Cambridge, the Earl of Derby, and other notables. The representatives of the Harris trustees, then in a wearisome monotone, detailed the origin of the Harris Library, and at a halting but welcome close of his speech, requested Lord Latham to lay the foundation stone with all care and ceremony. His lordship was handed a handsome silver trowel, and his response, delivered in a full and manly tone, seemed to rouse up the vast concourse of spectators as from a dream. And there was then a delightful rendering of the psalm, "Except the Lord build the house," etc., which put a life and spirit into the ceremony which it had until then been sadly deficient. The Duke of Cambridge, who had hitherto seemed rather bored, now brightened up, and although only playing second fiddle in the ceremony, played his part to perfection. After the stone had been raised for the purpose of depositing the usual coins, etc., it was slowly lowered, carefully laid, tested by level, plumb, and the square, and then declared that the work had been properly done. The singing of the choir was good throughout, and the response of the assembled masons, "So mote it be," was deep and impressive. There was only one attempt at a speech, and that was by the Earl of Derby at the conclusion of the ceremony. It was well received for respect to the honoured name of Derby, but as an oratory was not much. The thoughts were commonplace, and the speaker seemed to be suffering from some temporary ailment. After the speech, the concourse of spectators rapidly dispersed in search of other amusements. Well, brethren, I hope that my own presentation doesn't get a similar press, and I suspect that you're all ready for some other amusements as well. So thank you for listening to me.
Dear brother Mike, this has been one of my favorite lectures, I guess, during this period, because it had a topic of such a serious significance, and it has so much fun in the learning so many things, and the way you put it, it's just an excellent experience. So thank you so much. I was just laughing out myself, as they always sometimes say, kind of referring to some of the very interesting parts of the practices that were out there in different churches, or in different laying down the cornerstones somewhere in different institutions. So again, thank you so much for bringing up this very interesting lecture and topic to us, to sapere aude. I will remind everyone that you need to find the button raise hand in order to ask your question. It's in the right side of the Zoom panel, and I'll follow the order. I send my fraternal greetings to viewers on YouTube as well. If you have any questions, please use YouTube chat room, and we definitely, as always, read any question or comments to the speaker. So these are two main dialogue boxes that we have with participants. We have a question from Brother David Barrett. Please, floor is yours.
Thank you, Brother David. Brother Mike, thank you very much for your lecture. I would like to make several comments. The foundation stone, the actual meaning of the word found comes from the French. So in other words, a foundation stone is actually the stone upon which the building can be found. In other words, on which it's where the place is established or fashioned. In other words, it does not have to be below ground or above ground. It can be in any place if we have a very loose translation of the word found. I think you actually explained why we started the northeast column, because you intimated that the brother was placed there originally, so he was near the right hand of the master in order to receive an apron. That's the first thing. It is also the place from which he would there commence his perambulation clockwise into the light of Freemasonry. Otherwise, if he was going from somewhere else, he would be finishing back up at the marsh in an anti-clockwise position. And it's also the northeast. He is the Rough Ashler. So in other words, he's actually, as you said, in Lancashire, he's actually dark. He's in the north. He can retreat to the north, in other words, leave, or he can move to the light, which is towards the east. In other words, he is progressing from a point where he has to go back or he has to progress. And the other comment I would like to make, which I think some of our Indian brethren may be able to comment, there is something called Vastu Shastra, which is used in building in the Asian continent, where I believe all buildings start in the northeast. And I think one of our brethren might be able to comment on this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. Just to comment on that, there is a tendency to give meaning to something after you've already done it. And you didn't have that meaning at the time. A classic example of that was the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band LP. And somebody found that if you put the needle on the middle, because it was an LP, if you put the needle in the middle and turned the record the wrong way round, you heard a mysterious voice giving you a mysterious message. And people, I think people wrote PhD dissertations on what the Beatles or the Spirits were trying to tell us, etc. I've always been very interested in flags, and I was General Secretary of the Flag Institute, and it's notorious for people producing a flag which they think is nice colors and a nice pattern, and then they write the white symbolizes peace, the red is the blood of the people, and so on, and it didn't mean any of that at all. You know, they just make it up afterwards. But it's you know, why let the truth get in the way of a good story?
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Brother David Slater had made some comments. Brother David, you want me to read it, or you want to share it for recording purposes as well? And you have some questions as well.
You need to unmute, David.
Yeah, please unmute yourself if you. Yeah, please.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Hello, Mike.
Hello, David.
I just want to point out in John Brown's, as you know, that I don't know a bit about John Brown's Masonic theory. He does make reference. I can read it out if you like. He makes reference after you were enlightened, invested, and entrusted. Where were you ordered to be placed? At the northeast corner of the lodge, with my feet formed in a square and my body erect. When the Right Worshipful Master was pleased to inform me that I then stood to all external appearance as a just and right man and Mason, and gave it to me in the strongest recommendation, always to continue and act as such. And then he follows with, why was you placed at the northeast corner of the lodge? To which the answer is, it was because the usual custom in all magnificent and superb structures to place the first stone on the northeast corner of the building is found, if found convenient. Just a second, I'm going to scroll down a bit. If found convenient.
Right. What year is that, David?
That's 1802.
Yeah.
Finch's Masonic treatise, also in 1802, has no mention of it at all.
Right. And of course, what David's talking about here is this character, John Brown. He's one of the many people that wanted to reveal all the secrets of Freemasonry, that sort of felt that maybe he was be breaking his oath if he actually wrote it down. So what they do is they write it down in a code, in a cipher, which is so difficult to try to decipher that you would think, oh God, is it worth it? But of course, unfortunately for John Brown, there were several other exposures of Freemasonry where people had just written the whole thing anyway. And why would you bother with a cipher, a difficult cipher? But that's interesting. Thanks, David. That's good.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And regarding different customs of putting some metal into the foundation, what we do here in Georgia is that when the edifice is being built and the first foundation is now by cement being prepared, you usually, not always, but you usually take the coins and put it in the east side of it. It means that it supposedly have to help you get rich in this house and like have plentiness and fullness. So it's like that symbol, and it is in the foundation of your house. So that's kind of a thing
There's
that
an
we
interesting.
do.
Sorry, I was going to say there's an interesting story about this because it said you've been relieved of all money or metallic substances. There was an occasion when in England when a candidate had put a £5 note in his sock just in case he was going to be asked for any kind of money, you know. And of course, at the certain point when they say, have you got anything to give? He said, yes, I have. And he whipped out the £5, you see. And of course, everybody groaned and went, oh my God, because according to the ritual, if you've got any money on you, we have to do the whole thing again. So they were anyway, but a grand officer, and this is a good one to remember, a grand officer said, hang on a minute, let me look at that piece of paper that you've offered. And if you look on an English banknote, it says, I promise to pay the bearer on demand the sum of £5, £10, whatever it happens to be. In other words, the money is the gold or that it represents, and the paper is a promissory note. The paper isn't the money itself, right? Which is why we have this about the gold standard and whatever it has. He said, this is not money, it's a promissory note. You may continue. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. He's just created a tradition there. As most traditions, you know, are created, is when the director of ceremonies gets it horribly wrong. And afterwards people say, what was all that about? And he says, well, that's tradition in this lodge, you know.
It's how traditions are formed.
Yeah, exactly how tradition.
Okay, there was a comment from Eitan regarding two pictures. You had all the temples on the Mount Murray. He says that it's King Herod's temple on the right side that you showed, and you suppose that it might never been built there. So it's King Herod's temple.
Herod renovated the second temple. He's supposed to have renovated the second temple. The difficulty we have is that there is, firstly, there is no archaeological evidence of any temple there whatsoever. And nobody ever seems to have noticed it. I mean, we had all these people. It was supposed to be, you know, its costliness and its splendor became the object of admiration, and, you know, its fame spread throughout the then known world, but nobody seems to have noticed it. It would be like rather living in Edinburgh and walking up and down Princess Street all your life and never noticing this huge castle on the hill just over there. Nobody ever noticed it. So and there's no archaeological evidence for it whatsoever. So another paper that I have implies that it might never have existed. And in fact, there are some people, how can I say this without causing a fight? There are some people who think that King Solomon never existed either. But that's another story. More questions?
And why let the truth spoil a good story?
Exactly. Exactly. You know, if you go, are you actually in Israel or someplace?
I am.
Right. You know that if you go to Jerusalem, they will show you the actual room where the Last Supper occurred. You know?
I was there. I was
the actual spot where Jesus was born, the very spot on the floor where Jesus was born, etc.
No, he wasn't born in Jerusalem. He was born in Bethlehem.
In Bethlehem, sorry, I meant in Bethlehem, yes.
Yes.
And you think, maybe.
Well, I wasn't there. I can't argue.
What about Via Dolorosa?
I was there.
He walked there. He put the place on the hand on the wall, right? Somewhere.
Oh, yes. Yes.
The worst thing about Via Dolorosa is that it's uphill. So if you carry something, it's difficult.
It's very difficult, I suppose. The big one.
It's amazing how stories are created and they get bigger and bigger and they change the details. Policemen know this, don't they? That, you know, if you have 10 witnesses to something, you have 10 versions of what happened. And it's amazing what you can. Many years ago, I remember as a student in one place, I've been a student in lots of places, we were having a lecture about something and somebody came in and started screaming at the lecturer some various things, and there was a sort of scuffle, and then the lecturer said, "That's okay, everybody said," because, you know, people were really worried and oh my God, what's happening? He said, "It's okay, settle down. I've staged this on purpose because I want you to be able to write down exactly what happened." You see, so we're so busy writing. And he said, "And also, would you include what happened to the television?" And we had a TV, a big TV on a big stand on wheels. And when we looked, the TV had disappeared. Somebody had walked in, wheeled out the TV, and nobody noticed. That's how good a witnesses we were. Where the hell had it gone? But anyway, there you go.
That was a good example of it.
Yeah.
Thank you. For recording purposes, I will just share the file that has been shared by Brother Jacques. So the future generations know that Darius' first Persepolis tablet was found in 1938. And this was just, I'll read this small piece. A foundation deposit consists of 2 gold and 2 silver tablets in a stone box in the northeast corner of Apadana Palace. So the file is in the public chat if anyone wants to download it for your later use. I'll scroll up for recording purposes. It's a very short one. So people who are watching on YouTube enjoy the text as well. So there you go. This northeast stuff has started somewhere very in ancient times.
Oh, yes.
So that's one of the. A photograph was published in 1942 in Iranian archaeological magazine. All right, that was it. And Brother Shri, I guess, yeah, please take the floor.
Thank you, Brother David. And thanks so much, Brother Mike. That was wonderful, as always, to hear you. I don't really have a question for you, which may surprise a lot of people over here, just because I usually always have so many questions. But it's so wonderful to have heard this lecture. And it was, as David said, it was delivered in such a light and easy manner and in your usual humorous style. So it was fantastic. But a couple of quick observations. One is, of course, I sense that, in true Quarter Coronati style, you look at the literal and the historical rather than the esoteric and the explanations that are done sometimes to even squeeze a round peg in or a square peg in a round hole. because all the examples that we see, and including, you know, I would add the one that we just saw about the tablets, there are only 4 cardinal points and there are only 4 ordinal points. So chances are that if something is buried somewhere around a building, you will, there's a 1 in 8 chance that it'll be in the northeast corner, and that can then get highlighted when we're discussing these things, and you'll ignore all the others, which is a classic mistake that all of us as all researchers sometimes do, because you're trying to figure out something which fits your thesis. So that is one. I mean, on some of these other things about, you know, the human need to really leave things behind for posterity, and we all have that in various shapes and forms. I mean, it could just be having a Facebook page these days and recording every meal that you have had on Instagram and stuff like that. I think there's something very visceral about that. And perhaps that's what's led cultures around the world to bury things in the foundations of buildings. So buildings are probably the most long-lasting of objects that humans create, certainly much more than, they last longer than books or paintings or other things which may get destroyed. And in answer to the question which was raised earlier about Vastu Shastra, now that is also, it's not a science. It's, some people I might get shot for this. It's really a superstition, right? And you have Feng Shui in China, which is something similar, which talks about energy flows and Qi, et cetera, et cetera. But my mom always tells me about superstition, is that the basis for superstition is there's some kernel of, you know, how should I put this? For example, in Vastu Shastra, when you say that buildings should be oriented in a certain way, including temples should, there's a reason for that. I think you alluded to it already. You want the building to be north facing in the northern hemisphere, especially, you know, in tropical countries. You need to orient the buildings in a particular way just so that you don't die of the heat most of the time. So I think a lot of these things come from there, and it just takes off from there, isn't it? Also, on a lighter note, I just wanted to add, I think I've also been to that pub near St. Martin in the Fields where all those Masons were sent by our brethren. It's called the Harp, and it's an outstanding pub. It's actually, it's one of the more well-known pubs in London, and they've got brilliant sausages there. So anyone who's ever near Trafalgar Square, please go to the Harp in Covent Garden, right beside St. Martin in the Fields.
Well done, Sri. I think you're absolutely right. We pick up on a lot of things. For instance, the colors that surround us can have a huge influence. On the sort of harmony, our balance, the light, the quality of the light, even music has a terrific. I mean, many of these things. Why does it have such an effect on us? And so, you know, there are certain kinds of architecture that I always feel very comfortable, certain kinds of rooms, and some rooms that I feel very uncomfortable, art, some pictures that I feel comfortable, and some that disturb me. And why, I don't know. So you're quite right. We're tapping into certain things, and certain things that human beings can't always explain properly. But I'd share this with you. I had an interesting experience a while back. And we had a little bit of time on our hands, and there weren't a lot of us in the lodge room. And I said to them, "Look, let's just have a talk for 10 minutes." We all of us stood there in the northeast corner, and we all laid a foundation stone, and we were asked to build a superstructure. Remember? I said, "Yep." They all remembered. I said, "So how's the building getting on? How's our superstructure getting on? Are we better people for being Freemasons?" And maybe we're not the person to ask. Maybe we should be asking our wives, our children, our neighbors, our colleagues. You know, how is our building getting on? Are we building a structure that is worthy of us, that's honorable to the builder, and so on? And they started talking, and we stopped talking after an hour and 10 minutes, saying, "Guys, we've got to go." But it's an interesting, isn't it? You know, me personally, I think that the charge in the northeast corner is probably the best charge in Freemasonry. Me personally.
And if I may just
So I'm gonna
add,
get
sorry,
rid of-
Dave. Sorry,
Please
sorry.
do, please.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I was just going to say, Mike, sorry to, I think I may have interrupted you there, that I think the important thing to remember, and I think this is something which definitely all, again, I'm saying all QC, members or QCC members will appreciate this, is that the allegories in Masonry are just that, or in any myth, or in any legend, or any ritual. And the moment you start trying to take things too literally, you've actually lost the plot, in all fairness. And you're absolutely right. The allegory of a foundation being converted into a superstructure is a beautiful one. It doesn't matter if it's in the Northeast or in the Southwest or anywhere else. That's hardly important. But yeah, I think also I just wanted to point out because you touched on papal indulgences. I think I just wanted to also, I just remember that even in Vastu Shastra, which is the ancient Indian science, so-called, of how to lay out buildings, there are cheats where you can pay the guy and he's going to, or she's going to put something, I don't know, a copper wire somewhere, or a crystal ball somewhere, and magically everything will be fine all of a sudden. Even though they probably didn't have crystal balls 500 or 1,000 years ago in India, that's hardly relevant. But yeah, indulgences are always a good way to for organized religion and organized charlatans to make money. Yeah.
Well, money always matters everywhere and every time.
Money talks and the other thing walks, right?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
Welcome, Shri. Brother Lehan, you want to take the floor, or I'll read your questions?
I know I can ask a simple question, but you can ask the other question that's written down. I prefer if you ask. First thing is, you mentioned in QCC that his brother Mike is a MEZ. What does that mean?
No, what QC Lodge, Quattro Coronati Lodge, is a lodge, a blue lodge, and therefore you have a worshipful master of QC Lodge, a chapter, a Royal Arch chapter, which is a separate group to the Blue Lodge, has the equivalent is called Most Excellent Z, MEZ. They have 3 principles. So we were just getting our chapters and lodges mixed up a little bit.
Oh, okay, cool. Thank you so much. Dave, would you mind asking him the question
Yes,
I wrote down, please?
Sure. I will do that. So, Brother Mike, here's the question based on how you talked about how many Freemasons were so prominent. The first question is Freemason Church of England collaboration. B, grandiose public commemoration ceremonies as instructed in our Book of Constitutions in the first degree. And C, other Masons. How do you believe things have gone wrong? And what do you think we're supposed to do to revive Freemasonry?
Can I rephrase that question? It's my own question.
Sure,
Okay,
you can.
Brother Mike, what I noticed in your lecture was you talked about very solemnly about how we were the Masons were very close with the Church of England. We were really popular. We had these public events, but now we don't see any of that happening. What has gone wrong, and what do you think we can do to revive the craft?
Well, one of the things that started to go wrong, if you wish, is that in 1952, King George VI died, and we lost the big supporter that we had. He was a very keen Mason. He'd been provincial Grand Master of Middlesex. He became past Grand Master and all that thing. So when you have the senior person in something, then you get all the other people as well. So the royal princes were members, the archbishops, the church, the establishment, the admirals, the generals, the mayors in towns, the politicians, they all want to be a member. You lose the top guy and you start to lose the rest. And if you're not careful. So that was one of the reasons. And of course, what the reason is that we then had a Queen Elizabeth, who was not going to obviously become a Freemason. What the Masons in England would absolutely love is if somebody like Prince Harry joined the Masons and eventually became the Grand Master. I wouldn't hold your breath on that, because there doesn't seem to be any keenness from the royal family's point of view that we should that they should join Freemasonry. Because you've got to remember, the reason why they got so interested in Freemasonry is that Freemasons were very much linked to republicanism, to throwing out kings, to establishing various countries. They were troublesome people. And in many parts of Europe, Freemasons were banned by the authorities. But in England, of course, the English tackled it in a slightly different way. The English king went to the Masons, not personally, but through whatever, and said, would you like me to be your patron, or maybe even your Grand Master? And we said, being English, oh, that would be wonderful. And of course, we fell for it, because the very best way to know what's going on in something or to influence it is to be head of it. And that's exactly what they did. And we were taken over by the establishment in 1813. And the French actually said at the time, the English have given in to rank and form, and they have lost the philosophical impulse. And they were right.
Answer is taken, and hopefully Leon is fine with
Pretty
that.
sad. It's pretty sad. I mean, Brother Jax taught me about how a lot of monarchs were Masons. And I think Brother Jax was telling me that in Brazil, one reason it's successful is because of what you just pointed out. There are some prominent Masons. But is there anything else that can be done? Because it's such a historical institution, and it shouldn't depend precariously on an individual personality to survive. So
well, the
is
only
there
thing I
anything
can
else?
say is that there is a tendency when things are growing to say everything's fine, let's grow even more. That is not always a good thing. Quite a lot of our problems have occurred because we've grown too much too quickly, and that's happened several times. And then there is a tendency that when there is a decline, a natural decline anyway, that we panic and we start doing things to prevent that decline. And we do things that actually are not so good either. Freemasonry has, throughout its history, had a number of rapid increases and rapid declines. For instance, when we had the union in England between the moderns and the ancients in 1813, there was a decline in Freemasonry that was probably greater than now. And no new lodges, for instance, were consecrated for 26 years by English. They lost something like, what was it, about 90 or something lodges. It would be the equivalent today of losing 800 lodges almost within a year or two. It was a massive decline. It recovered. There'd been a decline in the mid 1700s. It recovered. And so we're seeing a decline, which is not necessarily terminal. What I hope is that Freemasonry will re-engineer itself as it has in the past, and start to do things in a slightly different way, and then absolutely convince everybody that this is the way we've always done it anyway, which is not true. We have changed with the times on more than one occasion. I was taught in a boys' public school at one stage, and the headmaster used to put up on the notice board a notice, and it would say, "It is a tradition in this school that such and such happens. This tradition will start next Monday."
Well said. Thanks, brother.
Thank you, Brother Leon. I quickly read a few comments which might be interesting for our discussion, as well as to be recorded. So Brother Hasso says, Brother Mike, entertaining as ever. Who said Masonry was dull? So there is an interesting remark from Brother Jack. I'll give you for right away. I'll just Sanjay is sharing some interesting remarks. Brother Sanjay from Mauritius. I believe that in the Hindu Vedic system there is an elaborate ceremonial rituals for the laying the foundations of a building. The place recommended as per Vastu system is the northeast. And in the southern hemisphere, and particularly Mauritius, it makes sense to orient the building facing northeast, as the northeast gets the most sunlight, and the northeast is protected from the southeast trade winds and that blow for most of the year. So that's Mauritius environment. Brother Hasu, to give an accurate description of what has never occurred is not merely the proper occupation for the historian, but the inalienable privilege of any man of parts and culture. That's what Oscar Wilde said. And there was an interesting one. Fame comes from developing the most outlandish theory that no one can disprove. Okay, and the last one, and Brother Hasu again, elitism is still the norm in the Masonry in most parts of the world. It is in very few countries that Masonry attracts and welcomes members from cross-section of society. If you want to kind of follow up, Brother Mike, on any of them, otherwise I'll give the floor to Brother Jacques.
I'm fine. I think you've had enough of me.
It was an excellent lecture. So, Brother Jacques, floor is yours. Brother Jacques, you need to unmute yourself first.
All right. So I wanted to tell an anecdote, a true anecdote, about the importance of having top people of society among the brotherhood. So in World War II, there were only 3 heads of state who were Masons. That was the President of the United States of America, the King of England, and the Prime Minister of the Czechoslovakia, who was in exile in London. And I have no doubt that indeed the presence of these very important people would help other people wanting to become Freemasons. However, some of you may have seen the debate of the 2 candidates in the USA last night, and you see the level of these politicians is not what it used to be. So the Grand Master of the Czech Republic a couple of years ago was being interviewed by TV people, and he was asked who in the House of Representatives were Masons. So he said, I cannot answer that. If they want to disclose their membership, that's fine, but I'm not going to do it. So, okay. Then come the next question. How come there are practically no politicians anymore in Masonry? Then the Grand Master simply said, well, I think, not sure, but probably many of these politicians would be afraid of being blackballed when they apply for initiation. So you can wonder in your different countries if politicians today would be accepted as members. Okay, that's it.
Okay, Brother Jacques. All right. More or less, we've been around 2 hours together, and I don't want to keep Brother Mike too much. It's already 2 o'clock in the morning, at least, right? At 2 o'clock, right? It's like 15 minutes to 2 o'clock in the morning. So if anyone wants to use the opportunity to ask the final question or make final remarks while Brother Mike is with us, Otherwise, we'll on Friday we'll have the opportunity to meet him again with the topic Temple of Solomon. It ain't necessarily so. So we'll have one more things to doubt about things in the history we've been taught. So if anyone wants to take the floor, otherwise I'll start wrapping up. I'll just check the YouTube as well. You got a lot of thank yous, loved your talks, and on YouTube, on the public chat here. So, Brother Mike, anything you want to leave, not only for the participants today, but for posterity, you may want to recommend anything or just give. That's fine. Then I'll leave you alone in 2 minutes. So once again, thank you so much, Brother Mike. I'll remind everyone that today we had Sapere the number 87. We discussed the northeast corner, Masonic fact or fiction, with question mark, with worshipful brother Dr. Mike Kearsley with us, and today's 30th of September 2020. And this concludes our lecture. All right. Once again, this part is, the lecture is over. Everyone is free to leave. If anyone wants to just say bye or something, this part is not moderated. And again, Brother Mike, thank you so much. It was wonderful to listen to you. It was one of the favorite experiences I had on Sapere for this last 6 months. It was great. Thank you so much. Have a good night.
Good
Thank
night
you so
all.
much, Mike. Good night. Cheers.
Night.
Bye.
Friday,
Bye-bye.
same time.
Thank you, Brother Mike.
All right. The room is here, still open. I'll keep it open. This part is not moderated. If anyone wants to take the floor, please do so. We'll have that's in this it's end of November and December. We'll have 4 lectures with the same timing, just to keep you updated. And we'll have right worship brother Dr. Christopher Earnshaw, who has excellent series of books and excellent speaker, and he'll join Sapere Aude in November and December. So this will be like exceptional timings, which is more or less kind of optimal for the speakers and for participants. So again, thank you so much to North American brothers and sisters to join. Got up early at 6, 7 o'clock just to join us and are with us today. So just the other time is the same at 5 o'clock UK time.
David, is Mike's Friday lecture again at midday?
Same. It's like 12 hours difference with UK.
Okay. Very good. Thank you.
It will be exactly the same time. 12 by UK.
He's always very interesting to listen to, Mike.
This was excellent lecture.
He's given lectures on all sorts of things. In my lodge, he gave a lecture on the Calvi incident. You know, the P2 lodge of Italy, where this Roberto Calvi, who was found hanging from Vauxhall Bridge in London with some bricks in his pockets, and the verdict was suicide.
We should get into that. That'd be a great lecture. The P2 incident is
oh, absolutely. If you can get Mike to talk to us about it, I can assure you of a fascinating hour or so.
Yeah, it's a great story, and Mike is great at telling stories.
It was great.
And David, while you were reading out the bit about the revised times, you didn't see my excited 2 thumbs up, because it means I don't need to stay up till 2 in the morning.
I can imagine.
We want more lectures from the Antipodes. And I see Brother David is over there, and I'm like, why did you not extend that courtesy to Brother David Slater?
Well, he did.
I did.
He asked me, but
I did. I played fair. I proposed.
Only after you'd given to Micah, I must admit. It's not too bad. I started at was it 9? Yeah, 9 o'clock, and it's almost 11 now. So I like this time better too.
But in Australia, it's like in New Zealand is like 1 hour even ahead, right?
No,
or 2 hours.
It's about 3 hours, and I'm east. We've got mainly three different zones. Although in daylight saving time we've got 5, because some states don't take on daylight saving. But I'm on the east, and New Zealand's about 3 hours ahead of us.
3 hours ahead. Wow.
Yeah, because it's now 11. I think it's right.
Oh yes, you're on the other side, on the west side.
No,
yeah.
No. He's on the same side.
I'm on the New Zealand side.
Oh.
But there's a big sea, Tasman Sea, the Tasman Sea in the middle. It's almost 11 here.
On the map, it looks so close.
Yeah.
You do know that the map, which all of us, I think, I can say that with some degree of certainty. Yeah, the Mercator projection is actually a very big distortion. So what happens is things near the poles, they get distorted even more, right? So for example,
Greenland's about the same size as Borneo.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and it's also a little Eurocentric, because Europe just looks much more prominent than it actually is, because you have these vast continents. I mean, which look far smaller than, relatively speaking. So it's a bit of a distortion, actually.
Yeah, well, that's true. That's true.
I've got a question for you. I noticed that during the course of one of your questions, you used the description Bombay rather than Mumbai for your area. Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
Well, you know how it is, Doug. People of a certain age.
Indeed, yes.
So, yeah, I mean, it doesn't roll off the tongue very easily. Mumbai, Kolkata, Chennai. I mean, when I'm drafting documents, for example, as a lawyer, I would obviously use those terms because those are the official names. But in conversation, sometimes, especially when it's informal conversation or conversation with friends or family, I don't know. It depends. It depends. It's not easy to say Mumbai or Chennai or Kolkata because you're just not used to it.
Yeah, I can understand that.
Although it has been more than 10, 15 years now, I think, since the renaming.
Indeed, yeah. Well, physically, I'm in Bournemouth. Now, up to throughout the centuries, Bournemouth was always in the county of Hampshire. About 35 years ago, the gerrymanders of the time decided to shift Bournemouth into Dorset. Emotionally and spiritually, Bournemouth is not a Dorset town. And in fact, the Freemasons of Bournemouth just ignored it. And we are still in the province of Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. Unfortunately, politics seems to rule everything these days.
And you know where you see it a lot is in the renaming of streets as well. So a lot of, because India has so many cities which are so old, and so many of those prominent cities had, for example, British names for the arterial roads. They were all renamed post-independence. But you ask 95% of the people as to what the current name of these arterial roads is, they wouldn't know. Everyone just calls it by the old names, even now. So it's really ridiculous. But I can understand the sentiment also. So I mean, I don't know. I shouldn't say it's ridiculous. I mean, I don't think it's of much importance one way or the other. But I guess I can understand the sentiment.
Well, it's the spirit of the times, I suppose.
Just two things I would share with you. We're still alive, and I mean, we are still here. On Wednesday, 14th of October, we will have Brother Richard Berman with us. But
Rick Berman?
yes,
Oh,
yes,
nice.
from QC. And we discussed, and he said that he would like to have Q&A session only. I mean, he'll be open for any question instead of delivering any lecture and then a kind of a question in the lecture. So prepare yourself. He's open for any question, but if you could be more focused on 18th century Freemasonry in England, he'll be just glad to go into many details. He said, well, he's well represented as, well, his lectures are well represented on YouTube, and you can find many of them. So, and he's been doing it for 20-25 years. So he said Q&A session would be much better, and let's have it audience interest based. So please have ready your questions all around Freemasonry, and he'll be glad to answer any questions. That was the kind of arrangement instead of delivering one more lecture from him.
Yeah, he was one of the protagonists in the debates on 1717, 1721 arguments going. I was at that meeting. It was great stuff, and it could be fun to tackle him on that.
Yeah, he was on the wrong side, I think.
Well,
I think Andrew Prescott has had it right.
Yeah, absolutely. I tackled Andrew Prescott on why he never became a Freemason, you know, David. And he actually said, well, the thing is, I'm an atheist.
Yeah, okay. Fair enough.
So then droit humain or Grand Lorient for him.
Well, droit humain presents his own
Yeah. But I really hope Doug and David are there for the lecture, because I know Doug was at the lecture. He has told me that earlier, the one about the debate on when, in case people were wondering, on when United Grand Lodge of England was actually formed. And I know David also has strong views on that. So I'd really like both Doug and David to tackle Rick on that, because it really helped us understand the whole.
I made reference to it in my Norman Spencer lecture, and Rick was then the master of the Krakatona Lodge. He said, well, let's avoid that at the moment. Don't worry about that at the moment.
So I suppose a very interesting discussion is coming up. So please.
I would think we should open with David and Doug asking him about that, asking him pointed questions. I propose that we reserve the first few questions for David and Doug.
I'm sure Hugh O'Neill would take part in that. If you noticed, he was here this afternoon. Hugh O'Neill is the junior warden of Quatch Granati at the moment.
Did he join today? I
didn't for some reason or other.
Okay. Well, sometimes when there are many, I don't see who's joining, and I just admit them all. So I may sometimes not see individuals who join. Rarely, but there is. It was great if he was with us.
Oh yes.
Excellent. And the second issue, I said two things. On 25th of October, we will have 100th edition of Sapere Aude. And I decided that we could do something special about it. And what was already agreed is that we take first 3 lecturers who were Bob Cooper, Andreas Jonefers, and David Harrison. They will deliver, 3 of them will deliver up to 30-minute lectures on what was the craft, what is the craft today, and most importantly, what they will see in 100 years of the craft. So we will have actually laying the virtual cornerstone on October 25th. as we have the virtual order of the Sapere Aude. So this will be laying the cornerstone on that day by three past masters and Masons and Masonic authors. So in addition, everyone will be invited not only to ask the question, but to deliver your particular virtual message for 100 years. Let's say how you see the crop will be in 100 years. Well, my points, which I personally made to brothers, was like, would it be more technology? Will there be more technology involved in the organizational culture of the craft or not? Would it be more inclusive towards gender, or still kind of exclusive to male in 100 years now? In the process, but if we go 100 years ahead. So we will try to leave this lecture as a time capsule, which is already there, but it's recorded. You cannot change it, and that's the point, right? You just leave it there for posterity to open it. So as in many cases, we would read through what they thought about today or current days. There we go. We will have something to leave for posterity, and hopefully there will be some YouTube kind of channel out there in 100 years where all this might be placed. But still, it would be great to see how contemporary brothers or members would envisage what craft would be in 100 years. So there you go. There is an invitation for everyone, every participant. You'll have 1 to 2 minutes just to keep it into something sizable. The privilege of having more time will go to the first lecturers. They've been first 3. So you're more than welcome to prepare something from your side and have it said in 1 or 2 minutes. The floor will take all the remarks and questions as we always do, even if it goes beyond the 2 hours that we set roughly for our lectures. So even if someone leaves, you still can leave your message recorded. And let's look at it in 100 years when we gather together on Sapere Aude 10,000 or something. We'll be watching ourselves. Back then, I think there will be some technology that can give us additional lives or time on.
Well, you better start training up your grandsons, David.
Let's see.
That's a really good idea, Dave. It's a good idea.
Thank you. Thank you. So this will be like on October 25th, and please come prepared for that kind of purpose. Looking forward for every.
Congratulations on that.
Thank you, Dennis. Thank you.
Hello, can anyone hear me?
Yes,
Frank,
we hear you, Frank.
Oh, the talking boxer dog.
Yes,
Yeah,
bark.
The talking boxer with the sexy baritone.
David, I'm actually, it's fascinating what you're doing with the 100 years thing. Is there, well, I don't think there's enough historians in the group left at the moment. Just looking at who's
David is there.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, okay. It'll be interesting
with
to answer a question to the current historians. Is there any precedent for this? Is there any research done on maybe somebody doing exactly the same thing 150 years ago? Did we have brethren that said, I wonder what Masonry will look like in 100 years' time?
Or were there any time capsules left?
Or maybe not necessarily time capsules, because I think there are a few of those, but were there brethren sitting in the, let's say, early 1800s, sitting around a table saying, I wonder where this organization will be in 100 years' time, and making projections?
Well, I'm sure there were, Frank, especially after a few drinks. Unfortunately, I don't think they were recorded.
Well, to the extent what what I received, the reaction I received, and some comments from all three, I think there was no written. Of course, they might be discussing or kind of sharing, as Brother Sri said, over a drink or two. But what I to the extent I understood, it was quite an interesting approach because they've never seen like this, and it'll be great. And that's why then I had different title. Then Andreas offered, this is laying the cornerstone, virtual cornerstone, and let's put it that way for the future. So let's, so I think it's
David?
quite, yeah.
Hey, this is Cleo. Good morning, everyone.
Hey,
On the
Cleo.
American
Morning.
side, I can say that Brother Brent Morris, he wrote a paper. I believe he did it for Maryland Masonic Research Society, probably about, I want to say about 20 years ago, 15 or 20 years ago, because, you know, in America, because of events that happen here, it affects, you know, membership. And so they had focused on how membership was being affected, not just in Freemasonry, but other organizations like churches and, you know, in fraternities as well. So that part I do know that, you know, has been written on the American side.
Yeah, but you know, Cleo, that's also 15, 20 years, I think, would not give the perspective that Frank, at least I'm assuming, I don't want to put words in Frank's mouth, but what really intrigued me was if somebody had done this 100 or 150 years ago, it'd be fascinating to see, did they get anything right?
I don't think they had time in America to focus on that.
Oh, no, not in America, but yeah.
Shri,
150 years.
in essence, that is what I'm asking, because
yeah, I can imagine.
you know, going back historically, nobody could predict societal changes.
Yeah.
Nobody could predict when the French Revolution would happen. I know they were thinking something like that might happen, but nobody would have thought that it would have panned out that way. Nobody would have thought that slaves would ever have been emancipated. You know, and look what that has led to. You know, society has changed.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt you, but you know, in the 80s when I was in school, I never thought apartheid would end. And then a few years after that, I was in South Africa and I was like, wow, how did this happen? I used to have a passport since the age of maybe 2 or 3. I had a passport because of the work that my parents did and all of that. And it had a stamp. Every Indian passport had a stamp on it, a rubber stamp, which said valid in all countries except Israel and South Africa, because those were the 2 countries back in the day that India did not have diplomatic ties with. So for me, it was a really big thing to actually go to a country where Indians were not even allowed back in the day. So you're right. I mean, things change on a dime, right?
Israel's great pals with India these days.
Oh yeah, huge. Yeah, we are, you know, we're into everything together, right? But back in the day, I think all politics, of course. But yeah.
Well, I've got to go. I'm going to pick up a gavel, a set of gavels from a late brother who died a couple of months ago, and he's left everything to us, and we should be using his gavel in perpetuity now. Brethren, it's been a great pleasure as you and lady and sisters. It's been a great pleasure, and look forward to seeing you all again. Take care.
See you soon, Doug.
Take care.
All the best. Bye-bye.
Cheers, Doug. Cheers.
Cheers,
Doug. Bye.
Bye-bye, Doug.
Thank you, David, as usual.
And David, I will share that document with you because it explores the history of, you know, the fluctuation of memberships and everything all the way up until the current time when the document was written. This is really good stuff.
Sure, and I'll circulate that in the groups.
Okay.
Sure, please do.
Can I just ask David Waddington a question? Which Liverpudlian landmark is that behind him?
Oh, nice one, Sri. Yes, that is the King David Citadel in Jerusalem.
Oh, no, I thought it was Liverpool. I'm so sorry.
No, I'll show you Liverpool. Give me a sec. Which one though? That one.
Yeah, that's the one we know and love.
So that's not
I was-
David Citadel by night then.
Yeah, I was going to put across the top of it in the blue, across the top, I was going to write not only for football, more than football.
And the more would have been spelled M-O. Get it? For Mo.
Yeah, really.
For those who don't know, he's the leading football player for Liverpool these days.
Yeah, the question one of the questions I was going to ask Sri was, what is Mumbai going to be called in 100 years' time?
It depends on who's in power, right? Or which ideology is dominant. Who knows?
Oh. Did you all remember seeing that the very large building in Preston that was on the previous lecture? I think with the big pillars.
Oh, I missed that lecture, so I wouldn't know.
Oh yeah. I was going to say that nothing much has changed. It's still wet and miserable in Preston. I was stationed in the army there. And like the guys that marched up and down, I had to do that. And it absolutely tipped down. It's like a monsoon. Yeah.
That could be fun.
Shri, a question. When were you in South Africa?
Oh, geez. That was 90s. No, sorry. Couldn't be the 90s. It was the 2000s. It was the 2000s. Early to mid 2000s. I actually, there was in the Eastern Cape, there is a tea estate called the Magwa Tea Estate. It is the largest tea estate in the Southern Hemisphere. And it was one of the, heck, I forget the name now. You know how in South Africa you had these corporations which were set up, state-run corporations which were set up. I forget the term of art, but yeah, it was one of those.
State-owned enterprises.
Yeah, it's an SOE, but there was some term that used to call it anyway. So basically, I was representing an Indian tea house which was trying to revive that estate in conjunction with the Magwa workers as well as the Eastern Cape Development Council, which is a government entity. So it was just fascinating, and we did turn it around. Actually, we came up with such a beautifully, if I may say so myself, such a well-crafted document, well negotiated, and within a year, there were thousands of jobs being created, so much money being made for everyone, including the workers who till then were, getting it. And sure enough, another year passed, and it all went to shite, as Brother Bob would say, because too many vested interests, because it started making too much money, I suppose. So it all fell apart. So I wonder what the state of affairs is now. But yeah, it was fascinating. And I mean, if you guys have a couple of minutes, I'd really like to share my experience over there on one aspect, which was related to race. Because as you all probably know, South Africa is one of those wonderful countries which is multiracial. And so the way it worked was because I don't know for what reason, but I really knew a lot about South Africa and South African politics in the mid to late 80s when I was in school. And when I was in Europe, I used to visit London often from Paris, and I even went to Trafalgar Square for some of those demonstrations just outside the South African embassy during the apartheid days. And I knew it wasn't just about Mandela, right? I knew about Biko. I knew about a whole lot of people, and not. It wasn't just superficial knowledge. So anyway, so when I went to South Africa, I was so excited about it. I found out from my trusted Lonely Planet guide. I have so many of them back there, right? About whom I can engage to take me around and show me some real parts of Joburg and etc. Go to Soweto, and not just the tourist stuff. And so there was this guy, a black guy, who took me around, and then he got so impressed by my understanding of his history and culture that he said, Shri, a lot of this is just touristic stuff. Do you want to see a real township and how things really were or are and stuff like that? I said, yeah, sure. So he took me to Alexandertown. We did the whole Soweto thing, and it was very moving, the museum and all of that. But then he took me to Alexandertown, and then we got really friendly. And please understand the context this is being said in, because this is it's not yet deracialized South Africa. There's a lot of pain. There's a lot of anger. And this is, I just want to share these raw human emotions, which I was sort of witness to over a period of 48 hours, actually. So so he tells me, you know, Shri, you're from India, and you have experience of this. You know what the white man is all about. Everywhere he's gone in the world, all he's done is spread disease and destruction and war and pestilence and stuff like that. And I'm like, I don't even know how to respond to this, but I can understand where he's coming from. So I just hear him out, because that's all you can do in a situation like this. And
see you on Wednesday, Brother Salvador. Sorry to interrupt.
Oh, sorry, I thought you were telling me.
No,
Goodbye,
no, no.
brother. And so that happens, and then I come back to the hotel, and this Indian promoter, he's of Gujarati origin, and he has some relatives in South Africa. His aunt comes visiting, and he says, "Oh, you must come and meet my lawyer. Shri, this is my aunt, and she is really interested in South Africa and South African history. Actually, he's just gone. He took time off from work, and he went to visit Soweto, and she, who's actually an Indian South African, and has lived there for much of her adult life, I suppose, looks at me, oh, you know, Soweto is a really dangerous place. You shouldn't have gone." And I'm like, lady, it's the biggest tourist attraction there is in town. And what do you mean? How can it be dangerous? So again, there were those racial undertones, right? And then the next day, I'm having lunch with the lawyer of the Eastern Cape Council, who was a white guy. And we're having sushi and wine, and it's a lovely lunch. And then after a couple of nights, this guy tells me, you know, Shri, they say, and keep in mind that this is the early to mid 2000s, when I think the theory first came out about how all life began in Africa. So he turns to me and says, you know, Shri, they say all life began in Africa, but if you look around you, what have they done since then? It's only the colonizers who came from outside who really did anything. And this was such a fascinating 48 hours for me, because I realized that these scars run so deep that it will take a long time for them to go away. And you know, it's almost hatred which is endemic, right? And these were all people who were, you know, got along perfectly with me. They were, I mean, people, just normal, regular people. But the racial tensions were just so embedded and so ingrained, I guess. It was still raw, still fresh. I'm sure it's much improved now, Franco, at least I hope so. But I just really wanted to share that, because from time to time, when I think about those 48 hours, I really want to unburden myself, because I find it so difficult to believe people have such strong notions based on race. So sorry, I just thought I wanted to share that experience of South Africa with you, Frank.
Yeah, I just think it's become more complex, interestingly enough.
Yeah.
It hasn't become simpler over.
Wow.
And I think, you know, as the world is also changing, the world is becoming more polarized, and we can see it, and more nationalized all over the place. You know, those divides are suddenly appearing in other places as well. You know, so on the one, you know, we're trying to go in one direction, and yet suddenly the world is going in the opposite direction again. And I find it very disconcerting from a world political point of view.
I just think it's a blip, though. I think, you know, it's when you look at a graph, I mean, what was it Dr. Martin Luther King said, Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., that the arc of history is long, but it bends towards justice. I think if you look at history from a distance, you will see that that is true. The human condition is improving. You know, prejudice is going down, and there will be blips. But if you look at a trend over a long period of time, this is a short-term aberration, I feel. It's actually a backlash, because I think the liberal elite around the world were just so, you know, just took things a little for granted, took people for granted, and looked down upon people who had a different point of view from theirs. And I think that's what created a backlash around the world, certainly in the States. even in India, one could argue, many countries in Europe, where democracies actually brought back a more nationalist governments.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff. I mean, one is verging on the political. I think need to be a little bit careful in discussing this type of thing too
We're
far.
still recording. Yeah, I know. But so far we've been neutral. So far we've been neutral.
No, absolutely. Yeah, I always have this question, and it's funny. It's hilarious for me here, because we have a very strong, because of our multi-constitutionalism within Masonry. We've got obviously a lot of English Masons and Scottish Masons, and during the whole Brexit thing that was going on, of course, Masons in England can't discuss Brexit because it's political, but in South Africa we can. It's got nothing to do with us, so we can talk as much about Brexit as we like, But in England you can't talk about Brexit within the Masonic circle. So when is an issue social and when is it political?
Yeah, but just so that I had a totally different experience around Brexit, Frank. I mean, my social media was just full of Englishmen, Britishers, talking about Masons, because my social media handles are all, I mean, I have some historical personal social media handles which I hardly ever access. I only ever go on social media for Masonic stuff, and so everybody who's a friend or a contact or whatever on Twitter or Facebook and what have you are Masons, and it was just full. My feed was just full of pretty strong political statements, and I was like, where did you guys forget that as Masons you ought not to be discussing this? And quite frankly, even in India, I find in these polarized times, there's so many posts by Masons on Masonic groups, Facebook groups, and which are just, I mean, by any objective standard, they're definitely political. So I don't know. I think it's just a sign of our times.
I think that's the nature of social media. It's the ability to fly off a first reaction and not think about it if somebody comes back at you. Interesting times, as you say.
Sorry, I was just saying you can't have a nuanced argument in 180 characters or whatever it is that Twitter allows you.
Yeah.
But anyway. So David, I really wanted to know though about, I'm so sorry I've been away. I really miss this and I miss all of you guys. But I'm glad to hear that everything is fine with the family. Everyone's out of quarantine and all of that.
Everything's fine. Everything's fine. We had very few complications, which are now in the past. So hopefully, excellent. Me and my wife didn't have anything. So we always were negative. We tested like 3 times. So they say that we're still to have it. I don't know, but till now,
it's obviously fine. A mild strain, so it's fine. Hey Denise, I missed you too. How sweet of you. I just saw her message.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm loving the picture though, the profile picture. You did something. Is it the hair? I don't know.
My whiskers.
Your whiskers. David, for this, did you say it was the first anniversary, 25th?
100th edition.
100th edition.
100th edition.
It can't be the first anniversary. We didn't start.
No, anniversary is still in April.
Yeah.
But it's the number is 100.
So are you sending us all hampers with Georgian wine and some, I don't know,
I could.
National dish.
I could.
That's a great idea.
We'll all open it at the same time.
You opened up my surprise for everyone.
It'd be like a piñata.
You revealed it. Well, one day. But
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, that could be a good idea for the anniversary.
Yeah, no, we should definitely.
If you send me some wine, I'll test it in advance.
Oh, well done, Tom. Yeah.
It's a sacrifice I would make for a brother.
Yeah, it's amazing how you're falling on that donate for all of us. It's just
a hard sacrifice, but you'll make it.
It is. I'd even share that duty with my brother Neil.
Yeah, yeah.
That would be an easy sacrifice.
Sri, I must. One of the funny things, but I was in South Africa the year Nelson Mandela died in the spring. It was a big thing. My wife and I were big on dismantling apartheid from a Canadian perspective, and our driver was from India, of Indian descent, and had been firebombed. And great guy. And in Canada we like to go south in the winter, and we were chatting about Canada. And he says his favorite show on TV, and he wants to come to Canada to drive the ice roads in northern Canada in the middle of winter. We're going south for warmth, and that middle of winter, that's -40 in the Arctic. It was funny.
This reminds me of this friendly sparring match I had with Mr. White. That was his name, my maths teacher in the 10th grade. At the international school in Paris. He was is an Englishman, and one of the IGCSE, which is the International General Certificate of Secondary Education, the O levels, the international version of the O levels. One of the questions, a math problem was on calculating averages and means and things of that, and it was worded in a way to say that this family is going on a summer vacation, and these are the temperatures. So calculate of these 3 or 4 places, destinations. So calculate the average temperature and then decide where they ought to be going. And I was a bit of a rebel without a cause in my teenage years. And so I knew how the question was worded. What they wanted to know was which was the hottest destination, because everyone's going there for the summer. And I purposely gave the ones with the lowest temperatures. And he said, "What's wrong with you? Why did you?" Because I was actually a fairly good student in school and all of that. I still always get the extra credit and all of that. So I said, well, in India, in summers, we go to where it's cold, not where it's hot. So, a lot of the times it's all about perspective. I mean, surely for that poor guy, it makes so much more sense to be an ice road trucker in Alaska or in northern Canada than to, be in that hot climate. And for you would rather fly south for winter, for sure.
Yeah, and I can understand as a trucker, because he was a professional driver for his life. It's a challenge to drive the ice roads.
Oh yeah. I think you make a lot of money, right?
For a short period of time.
Yeah. So are we doing these T-shirts or not, Brother Chichinadze?
It's an interesting idea.
Yeah, I think we should. Why don't you design it and we'll get it produced in our local countries? I mean, in wherever.
I'll drop the good kind of good quality image of logo. And you could put it, should be like $10 or something in any country. I don't know.
Only problem is in the supply chains in this day and age. I don't know if, for example, they're doing stuff right now.
If you are not closed or locked down, if you have the ability. Anyway, I'll drop. That's a good idea, and we are it to the extent we can, of course, for the October 25th. I would enjoy sending it to everyone, but it won't get there. David has sent DVDs which are still on the way. I guess it's taking American Georgia tour.
Yes, David, we can definitely do pink. It might clash with my skin tone, so I may do blue, but I don't know.
Whichever. Just if it shows on your T-shirt, it'll be great. Good idea, Denise.
You can choose whichever color you want.
I'll drop the logo in the WhatsApp group and Telegram groups, and it is expandable. It's like huge, huge, not file size, but if you expand, it won't go blurry. So you can put it on the hard side, or you can put it bigger side, whichever. So
I'll put it right here, so it's visible.
Sign of the beast. Everyone will be saying they put it on the forehead.
and I think for this session, we should all have a glass of wine or a glass of something in the hand.
Also a good idea. Yeah, why not?
That's a good idea, right?
Georgian wine.
Noted.
Send all of us.
That's a
pretend it's
challenge
Georgian
then.
wine.
That's a challenge. If you could do that, in many countries you could get it. So
I don't think in India we do. I'm so sorry.
there is a supplier that goes that sends Georgian wine to India. To the extent I know, yes.
Please send me his details. I'll find out who he supplies to or she supplies to and get the wine here.
I'll try to get the details from him for you. Yeah.
Or alternatively, a glass of something that's relevant to your own country.
Yeah, no, but you know, a glass of tea from my own country. No, I'd rather have Georgian wine. I'm sorry.
You might have to add something to that to put a little bit more spirit into it.
Oh,
it sounds
we are already such a spirited bunch.
G&T, Shri, G&T.
Yeah, now you're getting it. Yeah, man after my own heart, Francis. Yeah.
So I thought I would Google Georgian wine and see how it comes to Canada. And I get a Wikipedia page that says Georgia is one of the oldest wine regions in the world.
Yeah. Historic,
Yes.
I mean, like prehistory or something, right? Like
Yeah.
almost biblical times or something.
We even got the proof for that documented one. Not there are some jars which have been dig into the ground, and we found the not kernels but what are these?
The residue of the wine.
Yes, residue of the wine with pits. I don't know
for the
what's in
grapes.
it.
Yeah, the pits of the grapes. Yeah.
Yeah, pits of the
Grape
grapes.
seeds. Grape seeds.
Yeah,
grape
underneath.
seeds,
Yeah. So yeah, grape seeds. Yeah.
You have those amphoras, right? Those clay sort of amphoras.
Yes, and that is like now recorded as Georgian heritage because we do that Kvevri, which is now famous kind of branding marketing thing for Georgian wine. And in Georgian we use a word "hvino," and some say that vino through the Greeks went to other world. So could be something that we are sharing now, Georgian word for vino.
You know, our ancient texts, you know, the myths and mythology, all of that, they have actually 3 or 4 different kinds of words rather for some sort of stimulant or intoxicant, you know, similar to nectar of the gods kind of thing. And nobody knows what it is anymore. So we don't actually in India, while you can obviously get any liquor of your choosing or any wine or beer or various different types with manufactured here, not just imported, we don't really have anything indigenous anymore because we don't even know what it was. We just have these random old Sanskrit words for what were clearly some sort of intoxicant, but no idea what it was. It's like prehistory, right? Thousands of years ago. Who knows what it was? Sad.
Well, in case of Georgia, we do have this kind of quite long heritage of using these jars in the ground.
Yeah, yeah.
Every house would. It was not only the wine, but it had kind of magical sort of protecting purpose as well. Every family, would it be noble, not noble, just peasant, would have smaller or bigger jars dig into the ground with other, like several of them. And one of them was for the protecting angel, protecting spirit, and you wouldn't drink from that. You would kind of do some rituals there, blah, 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 whatever, which is lost, at least to my understanding. Even my grandpapa or grandpa was keeping that. And there is this story that wine would never end in that jar. If you would even take out a jar in the next day, you would have the same filled. My grandpa died. The jar was broken. There is a house now, but that story remains. I remember saying that saying. So it has like this very old lineage of having these jars, jar wine in Georgia, Kvevri. So it is now.
So I've gone to it's called the Liquor Control Board of Ontario. It's the government liquor store, and there's Marani Separa 2018. $15.95 a bottle. And it's available in 4 stores in Ontario, and we can have it transferred to our liquor store. So I have a job for today.
Oh, there you go. There you go. It is available in Canada. I know for sure it is available in eastern part, like New York, those parts, and in California as well.
There are other options in the LCBO, because I too checked it up with and perhaps I should join my brother Neil, and so we can't drink alone on that occasion.
But it's one store, Tom, is in Brampton, so you stop in Brampton on the way down here and pick up what they got.
That was smooth, Neil. That was really smooth. So you just let that, it just was in conversation. So now obviously Tom has to pick up the wine and you just get to drink it.
And
well
there
done.
And I don't
tip
have
of the hat, sir. Tip of the hat.
And I don't have to drive anywhere.
And there is probably some connection with a Georgian and a Scotsman, so he could finish the meeting with some scotch.
Ah, there you go. Well played, sir. Well played. But you know, in all seriousness, we definitely, once we have this damn pandemic behind us and the vaccine is out and what have you, we should definitely think of a way, or indeed first a place where we can meet physically. I mean, it could be Georgia, it could be Istanbul, it could be anywhere sort of where it's easy for people to get to, you know, with direct flights from India and Australia and South Africa, the States. It'll be fun, even if it's just for a short while. I mean,
Georgia. I say Georgia.
Well, Georgia would be great. I mean, I don't have, I don't think there will be all direct flights. But still, even from Australia, you don't have direct flights to everywhere. I mean, if we talk the furthest place, maybe there is direct flight from Istanbul to several cities, but they always would stop somewhere in Malaysia or Singapore to get fueled and then fly. But my cousin lives in Sydney, and he always takes Doha. Which is excellent Qatar Airlines.
Qatar Airways, yeah. Qatar is a good airline.
It goes to Doha and then Doha like 3 hours or 4 hours to Georgia, so it's one stop.
Yeah, I'll probably combine it with some visits to Europe, or you know, with my lady wife. Otherwise, I'll be in trouble if I just go for a weekend to Georgia. I don't think that'll go down well.
Next summer, hopefully COVID will be gone and there will be flights that we could take. And definitely will be so eager to receive all of you. And you will see the very small country with diversity of its foods and wines and excellent place to stay and walk and drive. Everything is okay and safe. Quite safe. So welcome. That idea will be great to implement. Yeah.
But we could do an anniversary party or something.
Summertime, I would recommend is the better kind of timing, I guess, because sea is available, mountain is available, unless you like the skiing or something, which is also great.
We have an expert. We have an expert in the group. So what we all should do is submit our monthly average temperature, send them to Sri, and he can decide. He can decide where we go and what month.
Thanks to your math class.
Yeah, I know. And Mr. White, poor guy, and he saw right through me. He was a lovable guy. He was a bear of a man, and he was one of those, you know, no nonsense kind of guys. And he knew exactly what I was doing, but I held my ground, and he couldn't do anything about it, poor man. So I got marks for that answer.
So what school did you do in Paris, Sri? How many years were you in Paris?
4 years.
4 years. And was it O levels you finished?
I did my O levels, and then I came back maybe a year before my parents did, and my sister was still there because in India you have a sort of like in England, you know, you have the O levels and the A levels. I suspect you may have something similar in Canada, where the 10th grade and the 12th grade are sort of important milestones. So it would have been difficult for me to adjust to just the 12th grade. So therefore I came a little earlier so I could do the 11th and 12th in India.
See, I lived in the UK for 2 years, and I was such an exceptional student. I did the 5th form twice, but the
They didn't want you to go, right?
They just loved me so much. The interesting thing was that the standard of education was really different between Canada and the UK. That was in 1970 to 72, and my older brother was taking first-year university courses in mathematics in Canada and couldn't keep up hardly in the UK because they were so far advanced on the math side. So it was one of the interesting things about that 2-year period of my life was trying to adjust to school going both ways. And when we came home from the UK, I had 1 year left in high school, and that was the 13th grade, grade 13, right, the matriculation year. And it was an interesting process. So.
No, but I must say that, yeah, I think in India, for example, the foundation, especially STEM foundation, science, technology, maths, is really, really strong. But education is so funny because it all depends on. So from my experience, I've got 2 college degrees from India. So my it was a BA. It's the equivalent of what the Americans would call a GD. It's a BA and an LLB. So it's a 5-year composite. You basically have 2 degrees. Instead of spending 6 years doing it, you crunch it into 5 years. And then I've got 2 degrees in the States. And the law school I went to in India is considered to be and has been since inception pretty much for years been the leading law school, not just in India, but probably in the region. And compared to my experience of postgraduate studies in the US, I've got 2 degrees one from Boston University, one from Columbia University. I think where I was just, and I just have experience of the British system, the Indian system, and the American system. And I found that in terms of using one's imagination as opposed to learning things by rote and being solid in the fundamentals, but when you really need to ideate something or come up with something original, I think what in India we'd call the Western systems, the American or the British, I suspect that may be true of many of the other countries as well, is so far superior because especially when you're doing postgraduate courses or graduate level courses, they require a lot of independent research and a lot of independent thought. And that's where I thought a lot of Indians struggle because they're just so used to, almost mugging things and getting it right and knowing it all kind of thing. But somewhere along the way, you just lose the ability for original thought. So yeah, it's a tough one. What is more important?
Yep. Your basic educational background would be similar to mine, being colonial from a historical point of view, right? British colonial.
Yeah. But I've also been all over the place, right? So I didn't do all my schooling in India. So.
Well, I just had the 2 years, and it was more like a 2-year vacation because we knew coming home to Canada at the end of the 2 years. My father had been seconded for some work, and my mother decided that when we returned to Canada, and some said, "Did you see?" and fill in the blank, the answer would always be yes. So we were tourists for 2 years, and once you get to the UK, Europe is so close. It was just a mind-boggling time of my life for seeing things. So travel is always good.
Oh yeah, broadens the mind for sure. Hence these plans for Georgia, because I haven't been.
It's interesting. Welcome. It's interesting. My brother worked for worked for the Canadian government in the. He was a higher level in the statistics department, and he has made 3 trips to what I have always referred to as the Soviet Republic of Georgia. I just know it now as the Grand Lodge of Georgia. but he was in Tbilisi 25, 26 years ago, in a time, as I recall, where there were shortages of things, and he stayed in private residences, like people from, I guess, the Statistics Bureau in Georgia put him up in their homes, and times when they didn't have electricity in the home because it was, I guess, rotating power outages. I don't know, but that was a special time.
That was actually after Soviet times in 90.
Okay.
If it was 25, then definitely, and the shortages were back then. When we broke out, like Soviet Union dissolved, and we started having problems because everything was interconnected in Soviet Union, even the energy supplies, even the standards of cabling, even the, I don't know, economy, all our industry was, I don't know, planified, can you say so? Planified, planned economy. So you would produce something here and it was part of somewhere in Ural or Siberia. Then it was collected somewhere in Leningrad or something. So you did many of the economic branches were actually part of bigger economies of Soviet Union. It wasn't independent. So these breakages always caused a lot of economic dimensions kind of going down, falling apart, and so it took us quite a lot of time to kind of privatize things and privatization, which means that we had everything, even the apartments belonged to the government. Only some houses were private. Everything was nationalized, and we had to buy at zero price, but from the government. So this process was privatization of our own properties, which belonged to us. We deserved it, but still it was kind of provided by the government. And then every single branch of the economy was experiencing the same process, because everything was kind of national government, governmental in ownership. So that's where the interests came along, and the same was happening in Azerbaijan, in everywhere. So you needed to set up new legal frameworks to get the energy from somewhere. You needed to get everything on your own as Georgia, not as part of the Soviet Union. So it took time, but 2003, many things changed. But again, that your friend came definitely when it was the early independence years of Georgia, which was very turbulent.
One of the interesting things about meeting from around the world is through travel or through platforms like this is you get to be exposed to things that you not otherwise. And one of David's best stories, I thought, was on his first trip. They were sharing things about Georgia and Canada, and so he was asked, "Do you have anything old in Canada?" It was what do you mean by old? It says, "Well, the house that my mother grew up in is almost 200 years old now." And the answer he got back was, no, not new things, old things.
Yeah, that's a problem with the new world, isn't it? Because for us, for example, if you come from, say, parts of Asia and you're looking at, say, US history or Canadian history, and you're like, what, 300 years old? That's like just now. That's not history.
Just yesterday.
300 years was yesterday.
My grandfather helped do, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, there are. I mean, we do have. I mean, I know that Indian history has monuments which are thousands of years old. What we got here in Georgia is like we still have churches that come from 5th and 6th century, which are still in use. It has like historic and religious purpose. And we do have some structures which are cave cities, which come, I don't know, 1,000 years before Christ.
Yep.
And it is like historical site. Like we have at least 3 of them present, which is Varzia, quite well kind of remodeled recently, illumination, stuff like that. But everything is very old. Another is Uplisiche, that's kind of beginning of Georgian First Kingdom. And another one is in Azerbaijani-Georgian border. But again, there are some others. Let's say you have all heard about the Golden Fleece and Argonauts, right? That's that history happened here in my country, in the western part of it.
Oh, really? I thought Argonaut, he was sailing around, Jason and the Argonauts were sailing around somewhere for the Golden Fleece. There's no sea in Georgia.
There is sea.
There is.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, that's true. I was thinking
Black
about
Sea is sea. I don't know. It looks like lake, but it's still sea.
It's not as big as the Indian Ocean.
Oh, well, it is not. It is not. It is not. Well, Argonauts actually came from Greece to Georgia, to the West Georgia, and back then it was called Kolchida. My family, and there is, I mean, in Georgia we have 3 languages and 3 different languages, but the same grammar. We call it relative languages, like family, one family of languages, Georgian one. And I speak 2 languages. There are people who speak all 3 languages, Svanetian, Migrelian, and Georgian. And actually, when Argonauts came, the language that has been spoke back then by the hosts was Migrelian. I mean, not contemporary, but a little bit changed today. But still, that language is still alive, and I speak that language. Not me personally, uniquely, but like around the million speakers who speak, at least 600 for sure, who speak that language, and it's actually very fluent, very alive. And what's interesting is that there is a castle which supposedly is on the place where the Argonauts have came to visit, but it has been renovated just this year or last year, and it's looking fine. But we don't know exactly if that's the castle, but that's the place for sure. It is called in Georgian. It's one word for Nokalakevi, which is this used to be a city, kind of in translation. So we have our documented sources in Greek mythology, not only mythology, but Herodot and Geographica. Everything has these references. So that's that old we are talking about, not 200.
Yeah, that's right.
You should.
Well,
You
my
should
friends,
get yourself...
Go ahead, Sri.
I'm so sorry. No, I was going to say that there's an order called the Order of the Golden Fleece, right? So you guys should actually bring that into Georgia, because this is where it's from. I think it's an Iberian order or something. It was started in Spain, or I think it was a Catholic order. I think Catholic Order of Chivalry.
Okay, I'll jump in now. I have to go. I have some errands to run on. It's always so much fun, these educational lectures, and then visiting together afterwards. I enjoy it very much. Thank you.
Thanks for participating. We'll be seeing you on Friday.
I'll be here. Thank you.
We see David's lion also is here in the camera now. Or the tiger, sorry, tiger.
I can't. Oh, there you go.
David, have a great night, and we'll be seeing you on Friday. You raised hand, I think so.
No, he was saying bye. I think Brother David Slater was saying goodbye to
Neil.
Neil.
Brethren, I'm going to have to follow suit, so I'm going to greet you all
No,
well.
it's much too early for you, Frank. Come on, you can't drop out so early. I mean, I'm trying to soak this 2-week or 3-week absence, 2 weeks maybe that I've been absent. I'm just trying to get it all into my system.
No, I have a 4 o'clock appointment. It's
Ooh.
7 minutes to go.
Oh, okay. Take care, man.
See you all again on Friday.
Yep.
Friday, same time, 12 noon UK time. And then we'll return to this.
Same time. Okay. Right.
Same time because, because we'll have same speaker from New Zealand. Yeah. Mike Kearsley.
Yeah. Right. Fantastic.
Bye, Frank.
Cheers. Bye.
Thanks,
Oh,
guys,
Denise is leaving as well.
Yeah. And thanks, Denise, for T-shirt idea and the wine idea, Shri.
Oh yeah.
I'll put it in the invitation later.
There you go.
Yeah, we can all maybe make our own T-shirts.
Yeah.
Yes, I will circulate the logo in the groups much earlier, of course. So you have time, if you will.
Make it a competition.
Competition of what kind of competition? You throw in the ideas.
The best T-shirt to use as the official T-shirt.
That'll be hard to judge.
Yeah, I was just joking. But anyways, have a great day, guys.
Yeah, have a great day too.
Take care.
Bye-bye, Denise.
Bye-bye.
Oh, that's... How long have we been on air? 3 hours?
3 hours and 10 minutes, including all the starting 15 minutes pre-lecture.
So there were I looked through some of the things that I had missed, as in I've not yet had time to actually attend the lectures, but just see the topics. There were some really interesting things, like there was some out of left field kind of topics as well. And I really was intrigued by the lecture, more than the lecture, the lecturer, whose name I'm sorry I've forgotten, who has got zero internet presence. And that was so funny. I love the idea. So I was thinking to myself,
Jonathan Hirschen.
Jonathan, yeah. So when I read that and I saw the pictures that you used for your to let people know, it had that, it was an anonymous picture. So I was thinking to myself, but hang on, he's coming on an online show which is being recorded and put on YouTube. So forget about pictures. Now there are videos of him all over the internet.
So that was the arrangement. He never turned on his camera.
Oh, heck, really?
No, we don't know him.
Oh.
We don't know him by face.
That is amazing.
Yeah, he said so. He kind of.
But did you find out more? Sorry, I'm really intrigued. I would have loved to have asked him what was the, reason behind such being such a recluse. You think he's a famous personality and didn't want anyone to know that he's a Mason? It could be that. He could be like a really famous actor or politician or something, and he doesn't want his identity known.
Well, he's quite famous in his circles, I suppose, because he's been to BBC, he's been to CNN, stuff like that. He's been PR manager or something, well, taking care about the promotion of several big brands.
But his face is never shown. His face is not shown.
That's what he said. That's what he said. But Isaac found a very short video where he said he's interviewed or something in a radio show or something. It's just 1 minute long, and he's there.
Oh.
And I told him during the second lecture that okay, I read this, but we found something on you.
What was his response?
Yeah, I guess he missed it, so I didn't emphasize too much. I thought then I'll drop him a line later on. So
interesting.
I will include it in the thank you note. Then when I will send it to him, I will include. This is actually the
out
thing.
there.
Out there, you're out there.
Yeah. because it must be very tough to sort of live by that rule in this day and age. It's really difficult. I know I wouldn't be able to, and I'm not talking about social media and stuff. I'm just talking about professional. If nothing else, my LinkedIn profile, or there's certain legal directories or these legal the companies which come out with compilation about lawyers around the world and stuff like that. I mean, they always ask for a picture along with your details and stuff like that.
I agree. So it's hard to maintain your privacy to that low profile that you're without picture in contemporary world. But well, he does his best, I guess. That one is missing. I mean, he didn't know, I guess, he was being recorded. And it was back a few decades ago. It was quite 90s or something, which wasn't the days of, I guess, this intensive social media being part of our life. So maybe he missed that someone posted it. I'll send him the link. He'll make him delete it, disappear.
Yeah, probably.
I don't know. I never asked what was the reason. I just respected his kind of.
No, it's perfectly fine. I was just curious, actually, if you knew, because it takes a real, it takes a very driven person to make that happen in today's day and age. You have to be really driven to be able to live that kind of have that low profile.
Well, there might be some religious or faith related explanation to that, which never been asked. But there is another issue as well, that he's a good promoter, and maybe this is the intrigue, who the guy is. So out there. So that could be a kind of professional approach as well. So you can't find him, sort of.
Yeah. Reverse psychology.
Yeah. It's giving this mysterious nature. So could be a professional decision to build on his profile.
Fair enough.
What is it, Brother Plumman? Very hard days.
You're sighing very loudly. You're like,
it's middle of the day.
It sounded like, oh my God, again.
And most worst is that actually it's middle of the week. If it was Friday or Monday, it's okay, fine. Monday, according to Russian, it's nothing happened. But Friday, everybody are thinking about holidays. So, but we're just in the middle.
Yeah, Wednesday is in the middle, right there. Okay. Would you be fine if I leave the room? I can leave the room open if you want to stay, and I'll start.
No, that's fine. I think people are just going to get so irritated because this Sri fellow, he's come back after such a long time and he's just refusing to let anyone go in peace.
No. We love having Sri with us, so no worries, I think.
No, I'm also going to head out. Oh, there he is. Hello. Oh.
Great.
What's his or her name? What's his or her name? What's their name?
You're muted.
You're muted, David. Yeah.
Still no sound.
Can't hear you.
You get that, Sebastian?
Sebastian.
Yeah.
Nice.
I'm too far. Oh, he's gone now. Thank heavens. I've got
cute-looking guy. Good-looking guy.
I've got two of them. One black, one